Chapter 24:32. Swish, swish, swish. The 4-foot-long Heaven-Barrier's sword shuttled through the crowd at an extremely fast speed, emitting a sharp sound as it tore through the air. One by one, the demon warriors were pierced through their heads by the Burial of Heaven's sword. They died on the spot and fell to the ground. Flowers of blood blossomed in the sky one after another, as if it was raining blood. Many demons panicked, letting out painful and frightened roars as they fled in all directions. However, no one could stop the assassination of the Burial of Heaven's sword. Anyone who was targeted by the sword energy would die without a doubt. Yun Yao wielded the shadowless dual swords and was on a killing spree in the city. The two swords danced, creating a dazzling light that filled the sky like a rain of arrows, bursting out in all directions. She was enveloped in a golden ball of light. No one could stop her as she rampaged in the city. Any devil that got close to her would be crushed into pieces, dying without a complete corpse. Meanwhile, Ji Tianxing stood in the sky with a cold expression and looked down at the entire city. He raised his hands slowly and formed a sword seal. He released a sword light that covered the sky. Swish, 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 swish. The dazzling golden sword light was mixed with dense white light. It contained an incomparably sacred power. Wherever the sword light covered, all the demons were killed. All the demon chi and blood light were purified. The sword light was like a torrential downpour. It sealed off the entire city. Tens of thousands of demons had nowhere to run. They could only be killed in despair and then purified into dust. After a short 2 hours, the massacre was over. The 80,000 devils guarding the city were all killed. Not a single one was spared. The defensive formation that enveloped the city, as well as the demon chi and blood light that covered the sky, were all purified and dispersed. The hundreds of thousands of enslaved people cheered excitedly. They were overjoyed that they had survived a calamity. Everyone knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Ji Tianxing and his wife in the sky. They thanked them for saving them. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao did not stay. They quickly turned and left. Then, the two of them headed south toward the hinterland of the vast divine nation. Wherever they passed, they would mercilessly kill the devil race army they encountered. The cities occupied by the devil race were also rescued by the two of them. On the evening of the 4th day, when the two of them arrived at the main city of a fortress, they encountered a troublesome matter. The main city was occupied by 200,000 demons, and the commander-in-chief was a newly promoted demon saint. In addition, there were 500,000 humans in the city who had been demonized. They had all become puppets that were neither human nor ghost. They were extremely strong, cruel, and bloodthirsty. They were completely at the mercy of the devil race. When Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao slaughtered their way into the city and massacred the devil army, those demonized human civilians rose up and besieged them. Originally, with Ji Tianxing's strength and means, he could have used a destructive divine art to destroy the entire city. What demon army? What demonized commoners? They would all be annihilated. However, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were both benevolent and virtuous. It was impossible for them to use such cruel means. After all, those 500,000 commoners were innocent. They were powerless to resist or escape. They had been demonized by the devil race and lost their mind. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were surrounded and attacked by the devil race army and commoners. Fortunately, the two of them were strong. The attacks of the commoners and the devil race army could not threaten them at all. In the end, Ji Tianxing used the power of the heaven-mending orb to cast the mysterious sky demon suppression art. 9 dazzling, holy, and majestic divine power shockwaves swept through the entire city. Instantly, the demonized commoners all fainted from the shock and fell to the ground. The devil chi in their bodies was also quickly dispelled. In this way, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were no longer restrained. They could slaughter the devil race army without worry. The battle lasted for half a day. 95% of the devil race army was slaughtered. Only a few thousand people escaped from the city and fled in all directions. The commander of the army was also instantly killed by Ji Tianqing's sword. That newly ascended devil saint was so weak that he was not even worth mentioning. After the battle, Ji Tianqing used the divine light illumination again to heal the hundreds of thousands of commoners. After a night of treatment, those commoners woke up one after another. They were all demonized and regained their sanity. Therefore, everyone prostrated themselves on the ground and worshipped Ji Tianqing. They were very grateful. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao did not stop. After leaving the main city, they continued to advance southward. 10 days later, the two of them arrived at Taiyuan City. This was the hinterland of the vast divine nation. It was only 400,000 miles away from Mount God Bestowment. At the same time, this was also the front line of the war. It was the place where the battle was most intense. Outside Taiyuan City was an endless mountain range. The mountains were majestic and the terrain was steep. In the wilderness and deep valleys north of the mountain range, there were almost 500,000 devil race soldiers and more than 800,000 demonized commoners. Taiyuan City south of the mountain range had not fallen yet. It was in a state of high alert. Every day, there were thousands of scouts roaming outside the city to monitor and investigate the movements of the devil race. Inside and outside the city walls were lined with human soldiers. They were all fully armed and ready to fight at any time. Squads of soldiers shuttled back and forth inside the city. They were either setting up defenses or patrolling guards. Most commoners had already left Taiyuan City and moved to the south. Only a small number of commoners had not left. They stayed in their homes to avoid trouble. They closed their doors and windows tightly and did not dare to show their faces. The sky above the city was shrouded in an extremely oppressive and heavy atmosphere. Since last night, Taiyuan City had received news that the devil race's army was approaching. Even now, everyone's nerves were stretched taut. They did not dare to relax at all. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao rode on the glass fire dragon and openly arrived above the city. The two of them were like two lanterns in the dark night, bringing a ray of light to the gloomy Taiyuan City. Immediately, a squad of guards flew into the sky and greeted Ji Tianqing and his wife. They also questioned the two of them about their identities and intentions. Ji Tianqing did not hide his identity. He said directly, "Tell the city guard that Ji Tianqing is here. I have something important to ask him." The captain of the guards was stunned. He had a confused expression on his face. The other 9 guards' expressions also changed dramatically. Their eyes widened in disbelief as they looked at each other in dismay. After a long while, someone finally reacted and let out a low exclamation of excitement. "Ji Tianqing? The leader of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, the heavenly imperial guardian of the Luoshui divine nation? Are you really young Master Ji? I remember that you were the #1 God's disciple of the vast divine nation. My heavens! Young Master Ji has graced Taiyuan City with his presence? How is this possible?" "Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Young Master Ji is a Kenshin. How can such a noble and important person appear here?" The guards were so excited that their words were incoherent. They were both shocked and honored. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing frowned. He said in a dignified tone, "Who is the city guard? Tell him to come out and see me." The captain of the guards came back to his senses and hurriedly bowed. He said, "Please calm down, young Master Ji. Your sudden arrival in Taiyuan City has made us feel overwhelmed. That's why we lost our composure." Chapter 2433. Emperor Yunqi? Taihao Yunqi? 7th Shensi? Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and looked surprised. He just remembered that Taiyuan City was also part of the Chu-Yun Empire. After he killed the Chu-Yun Emperor, he sent a message to Martial God Taihao and recommended Taihao Yunqi to take over the Chu-Yun Empire. He didn't expect that Taihao Yunqi would risk his life to guard Taiyuan City when the demon army attacked the Taihao Divine Kingdom. The captain of the guards observed Ji Tianqing's expression and asked carefully, "Mr. Ji, Do you know Emperor Yunqi? Ji Tianqing nodded and said, Don't waste any more time. Go and report to Taihao Yunqi. The captain of the guards didn't dare to waste any more time. He bowed and quickly went into the city to report. A short while later, a dazzling white light suddenly lit up the gloomy Taiyuan city and sped towards Ji Tianqing at full speed. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, the white light arrived and stopped in front of the glazed fire dragon. After the white light disappeared, a young man wearing golden armor and a golden crown with jade inlaid on his head appeared. This handsome young man in golden armor was the 7th Shensi. He looked at Ji Tianqing with excitement and surprise in his eyes. His face was full of disbelief. Mr. Ji, I didn't expect it to be you. As he spoke, the 7th Shensi bowed to Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao and said excitedly, Greetings, Mr. and Mrs. Ji. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao nodded with a smile and raised their hands to signal him to rise. 7th Shensi, long time no see. You're even more handsome than before. Ji Tianqing joked with a smile. The 7th Shensi also replied with a smile, Mr. Ji, you must be joking. If you didn't recommend me to my father, how could I take over the Chuyan Empire? I've always kept this friendship in my heart and will never forget it. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and exchanged a few words with him. The 7th god's son bowed and made a please gesture. Mr. Ji, Mrs. Ji, this is not the place to talk. Please follow me into the city. Ji Tianqing nodded and brought Yun Yao through the great city barrier array, flying towards the city lord's mansion. 100 breaths later, the three of them entered the city lord mansion's reception hall and took their seats. The 7th god's child asked the maids to serve tea and snack. His expression became serious again as he said, Young Master Ji, Jiuzhou and I were worried about you for a long time when we learned that the Pillar of Heaven's mountains had been destroyed. After that, there was no news of you. We thought that with your heaven-defying methods, nothing would happen to you. Sooner or later, you would make a comeback. Now that you've returned safely, your strength seems to have improved again? The 7th prince could only see that Ji Tianqing had become even more unfathomable, but he couldn't tell what level he was at. Ji Tianqing didn't expose him. He nodded slightly and said, That's true. Unfortunately, when I came out of seclusion, the Luoshui Divine Kingdom had already been destroyed. Even the vast Divine Kingdom had been invaded by the demon race. This time, I came from the ruins of God and went all the way south. I saw that half of the vast Divine Kingdom had been occupied by the demon race. Tell me more about the current situation of the Divine Kingdom. The 7th god's son was stunned. He asked in disbelief, Young Master Ji, did you come to the vast Divine Kingdom to help us defend against the demon race's invasion? Ji Tianqing smiled and asked, Why? Am I not welcome? The 7th god's son waved his hand and exclaimed with joy, How can I not welcome you? This is great. I didn't even dare to dream about it. Young Master Ji, you're the human powerhouse who knows the demon race the best. You've defeated the demon race's army and defended the Luoshui Divine Kingdom. Rumor has it that you're the demon race's biggest nemesis. Now that you're willing to help the vast Divine Kingdom defend against the demon race, it's a great merit and a blessing for all the people of the Divine Kingdom. As he spoke, the 7th god's son stood up and bowed to Ji Tianqing. He said solemnly, Young Master Ji, on behalf of all the people of the Divine Kingdom, I thank you for saving my life. The vast Divine Kingdom will never forget your kindness. Ji Tianqing raised his hand and used his invisible divine power to help him up. He said calmly, You don't have to be so polite, 7th god's son. I have a blood feud with the demon race, and the demon race is the mortal enemy of the human race. Moreover, your father and I have some history. I won't sit back and do nothing no matter what. Hearing this, the 7th god's son's body shook. His eyes shone with a strange light. He looked at Ji Tianqing in a daze and exclaimed in his heart, So it's true. It was only a rumor that young Master Ji was the reincarnation of Kenshin. Now that he has admitted it himself, it seems that it's true. Thinking of this, he bowed to Ji Tianxing again and said respectfully, Senior Kenshin, I've offended you before. My father has mentioned to us many times that you gave him advice in the past, and he has always been grateful. On behalf of my father, I'd like to thank you for your guidance. The seventh god's son regarded himself as a junior in front of Kenshin, so he was even more respectful. Ji Tianxing immediately frowned and waved his hand. Seventh god's son, you don't have to be so polite. I'm still Ji Tianxing. You can still call me young Master Ji. This. Taihao Yunqi was a little hesitant. Yun Yao said gently, Seventh god's son, the divine kingdom is in danger now. Let's not be so formal. Let's talk about business first. The seventh god's son nodded quickly and said with a smile, Madam is right. Then I'll do as you say. Then, he reported to Ji Tianxing, Young Master Ji, the divine kingdom is in a critical situation now. 3.5 of the 8 empires have fallen. The Thousand Snow Empire, the Flowing Wind Empire, and the White Night Empire have been occupied by the demon army. More than half of the Chuyun Empire has also been occupied. There are only 100 or so cities left. In this war, the demon army has gathered 8 million elite soldiers and divided them into 10 armies to attack from the north all the way to the south. According to the information we have, the commander of the 8 million soldiers is the ancestor demon god. There are also 5 demon saints, 2,000 demon generals, and thousands of blood gods under the demon god. After hearing this, Ji Tianxing had a general understanding of the demon army's strength and attack route. He nodded and said, Yes, this information should be correct. Now that the demon army only has this strength, it can be said that they have turned out in full force. However, there should only be 4 demon saints left. The seventh god's son was startled and showed a puzzled expression. Yun Yao explained to him, When we went south, we saved more than 30 cities and killed a demon saint, hundreds of demon generals, and dozens of blood gods. In addition, there are more than 1 million demon army. The seventh god's son suddenly understood. He said with surprise, I see. No wonder a few days ago, a scout reported that there were powerhouses assassinating the demon army in the Thousand Snow Empire. So it was young Master Ji and Madam Ji who did it. Ji Tianxing nodded and continued to ask, Seventh god's son, tell me about the situation of your defense. Chapter 24:34. Speaking of martial god Taihao, the seventh god's son's eyes brightened. His mood was also lifted, and he said expectantly, Soon. Father already knows about the invasion of the demon race, and he will come out soon. This time, Father has been in seclusion for more than 600 years, and he will definitely succeed. Ji Tianxing only nodded slightly and didn't say anything. In fact, he knew that even if martial god Taihao really succeeded, he would at most have the same strength as martial god Tianju. He still couldn't defeat the ancestor demon god, let alone General Fu Long. One was the reincarnation of an ancient demon god, and the other was the leader of an alien race. They were both extremely powerful. The seventh god's son continued, Now, the situation in the god nation is turbulent, and the people are fleeing to the south to seek refuge, just like the Luo Shui god nation. We have mobilized all the forces we can, including the disciples, deacons, elders, and protectors of Mount God. They have all led the troops to join the battle. My 90 brothers and sisters have also rushed to the front line to guard the major fortresses. The corners of Ji Tianxing's mouth curled into a smile as he said, Your godfather can be considered to have foresight on this matter. He has 99 children and 99 generals in the war. The seventh god's son smiled awkwardly and shook his head. Young Master Ji, you must be joking. Although father has 99 children, there are only 20 of them who are good enough. There are only a few of them who have the ability to lead a country. To be honest, most of my brothers and sisters are not as talented as Jiu Jiu. When Jiu Jiu was mentioned, Ji Tianqing asked, "By the way, where is Jiu Jiu? Is she also leading the troops to fight alone?" The seventh god's son sighed and said helplessly, "Everyone loves her, and they are afraid that she will have an accident on the battlefield, so they let her stay in the rear and be in charge of the mobilization of troops and food." But she didn't agree and insisted on rushing to the front line. She wanted to be the deputy commander of the Scout Corps, and she wanted to gather information personally. Everyone couldn't persuade her, so they could only agree with her decision. But Big Brother and I were worried, so we asked Fourth Brother to go with her so that we can take care of her. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment, then said with a solemn voice, "With Jiu Jiu's overall strength, as long as she doesn't encounter any fiend saint or fiend deities, she should be safe. But since she was leading the troops, it was likely that she would go to the most dangerous place, which was worrying. She is your father god's most beloved daughter. If the demons take advantage of this and use her as a hostage, I'm afraid it will be difficult." The seventh god's son also nodded in agreement. Yes. We all understood this and tried to persuade her many times, but she just wouldn't listen. "Young Master Ji, Jiu Jiu trusts you the most and listens to you the most. Since you're here, why don't you send her a message and ask her to come back?" Ji Tianqing nodded without hesitation. The seventh prince hurriedly took out a special communication jade slip and handed it to him. Ji Tianqing took the jade slip and used his spiritual consciousness to leave behind a message before sending the jade slip out. Swish! The jade slip turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the sky. The seventh prince was obviously relieved when he saw that the jade slip had been sent out. In his opinion, as long as Ji Tianqing asked, Jiu Jiu would definitely come back. At this moment, Ji Tianqing said in a solemn voice, "Seventh prince, do you have a battle plan to fight against the demons? Given the current situation of the God Nation, what are you going to do next?" The seventh prince nodded and said, "Of course we have a battle plan. It covers all kinds of emergency plans and will be adjusted as the situation changes. But since you're here, we want to listen to your suggestions even more. Father God hasn't come out of seclusion yet, so I hope you can be the commander-in-chief and command the whole war. After all, you know the demons better than we do, and you've defeated millions of demons before." After saying that, the seventh god's son looked at Ji Tianqing with sparkling eyes. His eyes were full of hope and expectation. In his mind, Ji Tianqing was the nemesis of the demons and the savior of the vast God Nation. However, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said in a solemn voice, "I've already thought about it before I came. I won't be the commander-in-chief, and I won't interfere in military affairs. Maybe you don't know that I was able to defeat the demons and defend the territory of the Luoshui God Nation, not because of my commanding and war talent. It's because I've been carrying out the decapitation plan." The decapitation plan? The seventh prince frowned and roughly understood what he meant. Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a solemn expression, "Only by assassinating the commanders and powerhouses of the demons can we destroy the fighting power of the demons in the shortest time possible. For example, if I kill the ancestor demon god, the fighting spirit of the demons will collapse, and we'll have won half the battle. If I kill 4 demon saints and 2,000 demon generals, the demons will be leaderless and collapse on their own." The seventh prince was overwhelmed with emotions and nodded repeatedly. "Yes, that's right. However, carrying out the decapitation plan means that you have to sneak into the demon's camp and put yourself in the most dangerous situation. Young Master Ji Yunqi and Jiu Jiu don't want you to be in danger." Ji Tianqing smiled and said in a playful tone, "You probably don't know that my main purpose of coming to the vast divine kingdom is to kill the ancestor demon god and take revenge." The seventh prince was shocked and said in a low voice in disbelief, "Young Master Ji, have you broken through to the immortal state?" Ji Tianqing nodded slightly. The seventh prince's body trembled and he was overjoyed. He cheered excitedly. This is unbelievable. This was simply an unheard-of story. Young Master G, you are definitely the #1 genius since the beginning of time, and there will be no one like you in the future. When you left the vast divine kingdom, you were only at the primordial spirit state. Now, only 8 years have passed, and you're already a peerless martial god. This is like a dream. This news had a huge impact on the 7th god's child. He was so shocked that he lost his composure. After a while, he calmed down. After thinking for a while, he frowned and said awkwardly, Young Master G, since you've broken through to the immortal state, it shouldn't be difficult for you to kill the ancestor demon god. However, since the start of the war, the ancestor demon god has only appeared once. His whereabouts have always been mysterious, and we don't know where he's hiding. Ji Tianxing smiled coldly and said calmly, I don't need to find him. As long as I kill the 4 demon saints and many demon generals, he will come to me. That's true. The 7th prince nodded and said in a complicated tone, After all, the ancestor demon god hates you to the core and will definitely find a way to deal with you. Ji Tianxing didn't say anything else and walked out. Okay, it's settled. You guys continue with the battle plan, and I'll carry out the decapitation plan. Chapter 2435. To the weak, war was extremely terrifying. To defend against the invasion of the demon race and protect one's home and country, one needed all kinds of strategies. But to Ji Tianxing, who possessed peerless martial strength and heaven-defying divine abilities, it was very simple to resolve a war. He only needed to kill the leaders and generals of the demon race, and the morale of the demon race army would naturally crumble. After leaving the city lord's residence, he and Yun Yao flew out of Taiyuan City and entered the mountain range in the north. There was a valley in the mountain range, where 100,000 demon race soldiers and 500,000 demonized civilians were stationed. This army was the vanguard of the attack on Taiyuan City. They were the so-called cannon fodder. The demon race wanted to use the lives of these hundreds of thousands of demonized civilians to blast open the gates of Taiyuan City. When Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao arrived, the 100,000 demon race soldiers and 500,000 demonized civilians were gathering and preparing to attack. The two of them immediately snuck into the demon race camp and unleashed earth-shattering divine abilities to launch a surprise attack. Fortunately for them, the demon race soldiers and demonized civilians were gathered separately. The two of them unleashed their divine abilities and secret techniques to their heart's content, slaughtering the demon race army without restraint. In just a short span of 100 breaths, the 100,000 devil army had been completely routed. The dozens of demon race generals were so angry that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They led a few blood gods' illusions and charged over without any regard for their own safety. They surrounded and attacked Ji Tianxing and his wife. The 500,000 demonized civilians also attacked the two of them under the command of the demon race. And so, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao turned to assassinate the demon race generals and the blood gods' illusions. The sword of burial of heaven flew into the sky and transformed into a streak of black light of death, weaving through the crowd. Every time the cold light flashed, it would take the life of a demon race general. Yun Yao wielded the shadowless dual swords and flashed through the crowd, constantly killing one demon race expert after another. Ji Tianxing weaved through the tide of people with his bare hands and quickly reaped the lives of the demon race generals. He would either strike with his palm, punch with his fist, or point with his finger. He constantly unleashed all kinds of divine abilities. Every move he made was a fatal killing move. Not a single devil general could withstand a single blow from him. Even the blood god, who was almost immortal, was easily defeated by his divine power. On the other hand, the attacks of the 500,000 demonized civilians were like tickles to him. They posed no threat at all. 15 minutes later, over 100 demon generals and blood gods were killed by Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. the demon army was left without a leader. The remaining 10,000 or so demon army soldiers scattered in all directions. The 500,000 demonized civilians also retreated, covering the escape of the devil army. Upon seeing this, Ji Tianqing decisively executed the mysterious Heaven Devil Suppression secret technique. He released 9 earth-shattering shockwaves that enveloped the entire valley. All of a sudden, the blood qi and demonic mist within a radius of 300 miles were dispelled by the holy white light. The 400,000 demonized commoners were also knocked unconscious, and most of the demonic qi in their bodies dissipated. The situation was set. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao chased after the fleeing devil army. After chasing for over 1,000 miles and spending 15 minutes, they finally killed all of the remaining 10,000 or so demon army soldiers. After taking care of the remaining soldiers, Ji Tianqing returned to the valley and used a secret technique to purify the demonized civilians. With his previous experience, he was able to purify the demonic qi with twice the result with half the effort. He was extremely fast. In just 2 hours, he had purified the demonic qi in the civilians' bodies. After the civilians and martial artists woke up and understood what had happened, they thanked Ji Tianqing profusely and shed tears of gratitude. Ji Tianqing didn't waste any time. He left the valley with Yun Yao and rushed to the barren plains in the north of the mountain range. There were 400,000 demon army soldiers and 300,000 demonized civilians stationed in the barren plains. This army was the main force advancing south. They were all elites. After the army in the valley breached Taiyuan City, this main force would advance south. However, they didn't receive news that Taiyuan City had been breached. Instead, they received bad news that their allies had been attacked and suffered heavy casualties. When Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao arrived in the sky above the barren plains, this main force was preparing to retreat. The main general and the other generals knew that 2 peerless elites had slaughtered 100,000 demon army soldiers in the valley. They had also killed many generals. They were deeply terrified. They only wanted to lead the army away from Taiyuan City and temporarily avoid danger. However, the ordinary soldiers didn't know what had happened, and they didn't know what was going on. Ever since they invaded the vast divine nation, everything had been smooth sailing. They were invincible and unstoppable. But now, the main general suddenly ordered a retreat. Many soldiers were caught off guard and panicked. As a result, the army's retreat was a little chaotic and slow. After Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao arrived, they attacked without hesitation. They unleashed earth-shattering divine powers and secret techniques on the demon army. The glazed fire dragon also joined the battle. It unleashed glazed golden flames that covered the sky and scorched the barren plains for hundreds of miles. Lava flowed everywhere. In the blink of an eye, tens of thousands of demon army soldiers were slaughtered. Their formation became chaotic. Many commanders of the demon clan cursed angrily. They didn't care about their own lives, storming over and besieging Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. Dozens of blood gods' illusions also hid in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to launch fatal attacks. The 2 of them were fearless. They withstood the attacks of the demon army and killed the generals and blood gods' illusions. One tribulation realm demon general after another died under their swords. They were either beheaded or smashed into pieces. This battle was far more dangerous and intense than the one in the valley. After a full 2 hours, the battle finally ended. More than 200 demon generals, including the main general, were killed by Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. More than half of the 400,000 demon army soldiers were also killed by the 2 of them. More than 380,000 of them were killed or injured. The remaining 20,000 demon army soldiers fled and were chased by Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. More than 80% of them were killed. Of course, 60 or 70,000 of the 300,000 demonized people were also killed or injured. Ji Tianqing performed the Xian Tian demon suppression art and purified the surviving people with the power of the Tian mending orb. It was already 6 hours later when he finished dealing with these things and returned to Taiyuan City. It was late at night. The entire Taiyuan City was dead silent. Under the night sky, only a few buildings were still lit. There were no signs of people on the streets. Only patrolling guards were walking back and forth. The entire city was still shrouded in an oppressive atmosphere. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao returned to the city lord's mansion and planned to rest for the night. However, when Ji Tianqing saw the seventh prince, he found that the seventh prince was pacing back and forth in his study. He looked quite anxious. Ji Tianqing realized that something was wrong. He asked, "Seventh prince, what happened?" Chapter 24:36. Ji Tianqing frowned at the seventh god's son's words. He asked with concern, "What's going on?" The seventh god's son quickly explained, "I haven't been able to contact her since the day before yesterday. She didn't even reply to your messages. An hour ago, my fourth brother sent me a message saying that Jiu broke into Xingyue City alone to spy on the demon race's camp. She might have been killed." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and asked, "Seventh god's son, don't worry. Tell me the details. What's the situation in Xingyue City? Who's in charge? Jiu can't be contacted at the moment. How can you be sure that she's been killed?" The seventh god's son took a deep breath and calmed himself down. He explained, "Xingyue City is to the west of Taiyuan City, about 40,000 kilometers away. It's a 1,000-year-old ancient city that was only occupied by the demon race's army a few days ago. According to my fourth brother, there's an elite demon race army in the city, as well as a large number of demonized people and more than 20 blood gods. As for who the commander is, my fourth brother doesn't know. That's why Jiu broke into Xingyue City alone to investigate the demon race. According to the usual practice, Jiu will stay in the city for at most 1 day before leaving. Even if there's a special situation, she can't stay for more than 2 days. Also, whenever my fourth brother and I sent her messages, she would reply as soon as possible. But now we haven't heard from her for a few days. I can't help but suspect that she's trapped in Xingyue City." Ji Tianqing's expression became more and more serious. He continued to ask, "What about your fourth brother? Isn't he with Jiu?" The seventh god's son sighed and said, "My fourth brother was carrying out another mission and told her to stay in the scout camp. I didn't expect her to. My fourth brother just sent me a message and told me not to worry too much. He's already on his way to Xingyue City. I believe we'll hear from him soon." Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and said in a serious tone, "Seventh god's son, just focus on guarding Taiyuan City. I'll go to Xingyue City myself. If Jiu is really in danger, I'll definitely save her." The seventh god's son was stunned for a moment. He quickly bowed to express his gratitude. "Thank you, young Master Ji. With you personally taking action, nothing will go wrong. I can rest assured." Ji Tianqing nodded and said nothing more. He turned and left the study. When he returned to his residence and saw that Yun Yao was resting, he told her the truth. "Yao, you stay here and rest well. I need to make a trip to Star Moon City and will be back soon." Jiu snuck into Star Moon City alone to spy on the demon race. There has been no news from her for 3 days now. "I'm afraid she has met with some mishap." Yun Yao thought for a moment and asked with concern, "Jiu? The youngest daughter of martial god Taihao? Is she the little girl who guided you to the Shenwu continent?" Ji Tianqing nodded and spoke with a complicated tone. "Back then, I knew nothing about the Shenwu continent, and she was the one who told me a lot of important information. Later on, when I came to the vast divine kingdom to cultivate on Mount Godseal, she took care of me many times." Yun Yao nodded and said solemnly, "If that's the case, then she's in danger. Naturally, you have to rescue her. You're duty-bound. Why don't I go with you?" Ji Tianqing waved his hand and comforted her. "There's no need. You've been running around with me for so long and haven't rested at all. I can handle this. You just stay here and rest. I'll be back soon." All right, Yun Yao nodded in agreement and gently reminded him, then you have to be careful. Don't underestimate the enemy. Ji Tianxing waved at her and turned to leave. Once he was out of the room, he leaped into the night sky and rushed west as fast as lightning. At the same time, 40,000 kilometers away from Taiyuan City, in the mottled Star Moon City, under the night sky, the city was shrouded in a layer of black demonic energy. It was cold and deathly still. The north and south gates were tightly shut and were guarded by a large number of demon race soldiers. Nearly 100,000 soldiers were stationed on the surrounding walls. The entire Star Moon City had become the demon army's main camp. There were 600,000 demon race soldiers and 400,000 demonized civilians stationed there. There was also a large number of elite experts in the city lord's residence, making it even more impregnable. At this time, within the city lord's residence, there was an ancient underground palace deep underground that was enveloped by a powerful holy formation. The entrances and main passages of the underground palace were guarded by a large number of murderous demon race soldiers dressed in black armor. In the deepest part of the underground palace, there was a large hall that was 1,000 feet wide. Blood-red lights lit up the surrounding walls. The air was filled with black demonic energy and the cold aura of death. In the center of the hall, there was a 100-meter-tall demon altar. It looked like the head of a demon and was completely black and red. The surface of the altar was densely covered in formation patterns that were glowing with a dark red light. It looked eerie and strange. At the top of the altar, there was a stone pillar carved with a demon. A petite girl covered in blood was chained to the pillar. She was only 4 feet tall and had a small round face that looked like an apple. She also had a pair of large golden eyes. Anyone who saw her would think that she was cute. Unfortunately, she was already heavily injured at this moment, and she was in an extremely miserable and sorry state. Her red dress had long been torn and tattered. Her blonde hair was disheveled and the hair accessories on her head were shattered. Her exposed arms and legs were covered with hideous wounds that were so deep that the bones could be seen. 2 specially made black soul-sealing chains passed through her shoulders and bound her body, firmly tying her to the stone pillar. There was a fist-sized bloody hole on each of her shoulders. Her skin and flesh curled outwards, revealing her white shoulder blades. The black chains passed through the joints of her bones and black blood kept flowing out of the wounds. An indistinct blood-red light shrouded her from head to toe, suppressing her soul. A delicate, cute, petite, and weak girl had been subjected to such cruel torture. Such a scene was extremely impactful and shocking. At this time, the sound of footsteps could be heard in the hall. A tall and burly demon race man in a loose black robe walked out of the darkness. He was more than 10 feet tall and as strong as an iron tower. His bald head was covered with demon race patterns and his whole body was emitting a ferocious aura. He was the 3rd demon saint, Ba Tuo. Ba Tuo passed through the darkness and flew to the top of the demon altar. He stood in front of the little girl and sneered. "Dear Princess Jiu, have you thought about what I said before?" Hearing Ba Tuo's words, Jiu, who was tied to the stone pillar, slowly opened her eyes. Her big eyes that were as clear as water had long since become dim and lifeless. Her golden eyes were filled with grief, anger, and murderous intent. She glared at Ba Tuo angrily and shouted in a hoarse voice, "Damned demon! Don't even think about it." Chapter 24:37. Jiu's expression and tone were filled with grief and indignation. Ba Tuo raised an eyebrow as a mocking sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Haha, the relationship between you siblings is really deep. You would rather die than obey my orders. Your brother knows that you've been captured, but he still wants to die. Tiske. What a foolish and laughable pair of God's son and daughter." Jiu's eyes widened when she heard this. Anxiety flashed through her eyes. "Great demon, what do you mean?" Ba Tuo did not answer. He turned around and waved at the darkness. Soon, 2 demon generals in blood-red armor walked out from the dark corner of the hall. The 2 tall demon generals carried a skinny young man in a golden robe toward the devil's altar. The young man's hair was messy, and his long hair was stained with blood. His golden robe was tattered and stained with blood. His arms were stiff like wood, and his legs were cut off at the knees. There were dozens of wounds all over his body. He was in a semi-conscious state and was dragged over by the 2 demon generals like a piece of wood. Everywhere they passed, the ground was splattered with drops of dark red blood. When the 2 demon generals carried the young man to the devil's altar, Jiujiu's expression changed. She stared at the young man in disbelief. Tears welled up in her eyes as she cried out sorrowfully, Fourth brother, why are you so foolish?" With Jiujiu's intelligence, of course, she could guess what was going on. Therefore, she was worried and angry. At the same time, her heart was filled with guilt and self-blame. Batua saw Jiujiu's tear-stained face, and could not help but sneer proudly. "Haha, so it's Martial God Taihao's 4th son. That's great. I've suddenly changed my mind. A mere 10 main cities and 1,000,000 soldiers are nothing to me. Jiujiu, I heard you're Martial God Taihao's favorite daughter? If I use your lives to exchange for a treasure from him, what do you think he'll do?" Batua looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. He looked arrogant and proud. Jiujiu gritted her teeth in anger and cursed fiercely. "Batua, you despicable and shameless devil, Father God will definitely tear you to pieces and make you regret being born into this world." Batua wasn't angry at all. Instead, he sneered contemptuously, "Haha, the vast divine kingdom is about to be destroyed. Your father can't even protect himself, so why would he care about your lives? Cherish the last few days of your life. When your father comes out, you will no longer have any value." After saying that, Tata waved his hand and shot out a cloud of devil chi. The cloud of devil chi enveloped the severely injured 4th god's son and pressed him against the stone pillar at the top of the altar. Ka. Under the control of Tatua, the 2 dark and cold soul-sealing chains pierced through the shoulders of the 4th god's child like 2 poisonous snakes and tied him to the stone pillar. The soul-sealing chains moved and pulled at Jiujiu's wound, causing dirty blood to spurt out. The chains rubbed against her shoulder blades, making a dry, bone-chilling sound. The piercing pain caused her entire body to tremble, and her face was ghastly pale. She couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. The 4th god's child was also awakened by the piercing pain and let out a painful scream. Seeing this, Tatua sneered eerily, "Your 2 noble highnesses, stay here and enjoy the torment of the soul-burning altar." Ha! After saying that, Tatua shook his loose black robe and left with the 2 devil generals. Jiujiu and the 4th god's child were so angry that their eyes almost popped out of their socket. They stared at Tatuo's disappearing figure and cursed angrily. After a long while, the 4th god's child finally calmed down. He and Jiujiu were tied to the 2 sides of the stone pillar, back to back, and tied to the same soul-sealing chains. Once one of them struggled too much, the other would also be tortured. Therefore, both of them could only endure the soul-burning and bone-eroding pain, not daring to act rashly. The 4th god's child panted for a while before he said in a hoarse voice, "Jiujiu, why were you so reckless as to sneak into Xingyue City alone? Do you know that my 7th brother and I, as well as many other brothers and sisters, were all very worried about you?" Jiujiu leaned weakly against the stone pillar and said with tears in her eyes, "4th brother, I'm sorry I dragged you into this. Why were you so stupid? You knew that I was captured, yet you still came to Xingyue City to die?" The 4th god's child smiled bitterly and said, "Before entering Xingyue City, no one knew what was going on in the city. There were actually 2 devil saints guarding the city. We haven't heard from you for 3 days. Even if I had to take the risk, I still had to sneak into the city to look for you. Now, I got what I asked for. You don't have to blame yourself. Being able to see you again, as long as you're still alive, your fourth brother will be comforted." After a moment of silence, he sighed again and said, "Sigh. It's a pity that I lost to Ta-Tuah and that devil saint. I didn't even have the chance to send a message to my seventh brother." Jiu was also silent, not knowing how to answer. She was extremely regretful. No matter how much she cared about the country and its people, she shouldn't have been so reckless to help the God nation. What was done could not be undone. She and her fourth brother were both in prison. No matter how much she regretted it, it would be useless. In her heart, she only hoped that it wouldn't matter if she died, but she didn't want to implicate her other brothers and sisters. In particular, she couldn't let the devil race use her to threaten her father. Although the brother and sister were silent, they had the same idea in their hearts. The fourth God's child knew that he was going to die, so he didn't ask for anything else. He only hoped that the pain would end as soon as possible. Soon, their divine souls couldn't withstand the torture of the altar and gradually fell into a coma. However, at this moment, a trace of divine power suddenly flashed in a dark corner of the hall. Swoosh! A ripple appeared in the darkness, and a blurry figure appeared in the corner of the hall. This figure was a handsome young human wearing a white robe. He was tall and burly, with sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. He had a mysterious and majestic aura around him. This was the underground palace in the depths of the city lord's mansion. It was heavily guarded, had countless experts, and was protected by a saint-level array. But to him, these were not worth mentioning. Not to mention the entire Xinghua city, even the entire world could come and go as he pleased. Because he was Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing stood in the darkness, his cold and indifferent gaze sweeping across his surroundings. The next moment, he locked his eyes on the altar and stared at Jiu and the fourth God's child on the stone pillars. His cold eyes became a lot gentler. After seeing Jiu's situation, there was even a trace of pity and anger in his eyes. Swoosh! Ji Tianxing's body flashed and he arrived at the top of the altar in front of Jiu. He looked at Jiu, who was severely injured and unconscious, and said with his divine mind, "Jiu, wake up." Jiu, who was unconscious, vaguely heard his call and tried to open her blurry eyes. She stared at Ji Tianxing and was stunned for a long time before she recognized him. Chapter 2438. Jiu did not expect Ji Tianxing to come and save her. This was the most painful and desperate moment for her. She thought that no one could save her other than her Father God. Even if the holy sons of the martial sage realm came, they would end up like the fourth holy son. They would be severely injured by Ming Tuo and imprisoned in this underground palace. She did not want her brothers to be implicated, so she did not expect anyone to save her. However, fate was so wonderful. The person she least expected had appeared. "Tianxing, why are you in Star Moon City? After the Pillar of Heaven's mountain was destroyed, you disappeared for half a year. Where have you been?" Jiu was a little emotional. She looked at Ji Tianxing with burning eyes and asked with concern. She had been worried about Ji Tianxing ever since she knew that the Pillar of Heaven's mountain was destroyed. Ji Tianxing waved his hand and said calmly, Jiu, it's a long story. I'll explain it to you after I save you. Wake your fourth brother up and let him be prepared. I'm going to break the chains." Jiu knew that the situation was critical and it was not the time to catch up. She followed Ji Tianxing's instructions and called the fourth holy son. The fourth holy son's spiritual soul was severely injured and he was on the verge of losing consciousness. Jiu called him a few times before he woke up. Then, Ji Tianxing took out the Burial of Heaven's sword and infused his divine power into the Burial of Heaven's sword to form a sacred white sword radiance. He held the Burial of Heaven's sword in his right hand and slashed it down. Crack! With a soft sound, the soul-sealing chains that were as thick as wrists were cut off by the Burial of Heaven's sword. Ji Tianxing moved quickly. Jiu and the fourth holy son did not feel any pain and they regained their freedom. The two of them endured the pain and struggled with all their might. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and hundreds of dazzling lights were shot out, dispelling the demonic power that sealed them. After a short while, when Jiu Jiu and the fourth divine child broke free from the seal, the evil demon altar shook violently, and dozens of cracks appeared on it. The altar trembled incessantly, emitting a muffled rumbling sound that spread throughout the underground palace. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing frowned, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "You guys hide first, the two devil saints will be here soon." Jiu Jiu and the fourth god's child were panting heavily as they were immersed in the excitement of surviving the calamity. Suddenly hearing Ji Tianqing's words, the two of them tensed up and revealed worried expressions. "Tianqing, let's go. I've already implicated fourth brother, I don't want to implicate you as well. There are two great devil saints in the city. One of them is Ba Tuo, and he's very powerful." Before the fourth divine prince could finish, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and interrupted him. He opened the entrance to the Sword World and said in a deep voice, "Enter the Sword World and rest for a while. Since I've come to Star Moon City, I can't possibly return empty-handed." Jiu Jiu and the fourth god's child were startled and revealed a puzzled expression. "Tianqing, what are you trying to do?" "Young Master Ji, you must be careful. Don't be careless." Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a cold smile, and his eyes revealed a strong murderous intent. "If I don't kill the two great devil saints and destroy the devil race army in Star Moon City, wouldn't my trip here be in vain?" Jiu Jiu and the fourth god's child were stunned and revealed a shocked expression. Before the two of them could persuade him, Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out a ray of golden light, taking the two of them into the Sword World. Almost at the same time, the door at the corner of the hall opened. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Two burly figures in black robes flashed through the darkness and came to the center of the hall at lightning speed. They were two devil race experts whose bodies were as strong as iron towers, and their appearances were ferocious and terrifying. The leader was a bald man, and it was Ba Tuo. The middle-aged man beside him had a head of purple hair that was tied into a dozen braids. It was the newly promoted great devil saint Wu Su. The two of them rushed to the bottom of the altar with murderous intent, and before they could see Ji Tianqing's appearance, they shouted angrily, "Bastard! How dare you break into the underground palace? Are you tired of living? Bastard of the human race! Today I will tear you into pieces and burn your bones to ashes." As they spoke, Ba Tuo and Wu Su took out their swords and sabers, and their bodies emitted a strong murderous intent. The surging black fog and demonic qi spread out in all directions, shrouding the entire hall. Ji Tianqing stood at the top of the altar and looked down at Ba Tuo with a mocking sneer. "Ba Tuo, your time of death has come." Abruptly, Ba Tuo's body shook when he heard this. He finally saw Ji Tianqing's appearance clearly, and his face changed immediately, revealing an extremely frightened look. You are Ji Tianqing?" Wu Su also frowned, and his expression became extremely solemn. He stared at Ji Tianqing sharply. Although he had just become a great devil saint 2 years ago, and had not fought with Ji Tianqing before. However, the name Ji Tianqing was like thunder to his ears, and even Wu Su was fearful of him. Ji Tianqing looked down at Ba Tuo and sneered, "Before you die, I will give you 10 breaths of time. You can send a message to the ancestor great devil god. Tell him that Ji Tianqing is here, and ask him to kneel down and accept his death." Such arrogant and overbearing words filled Ma Tuo and Wu Su with indignation and humiliation. Wu Su gritted his teeth in anger and shouted coldly, "Ji Tianqing, you are too arrogant. Just you? You are not qualified for the ancestor to take action." As he spoke, Wu Su held his pitch-black saber with both hands and pounced at Ji Tianqing without any regard for his own safety. "Heavenly devil domineering saber!" Wu Su roared, and his pitch-black saber emitted a black radiance that was 100 feet long. It condensed into a deathly saber radiance, and slashed at Ji Tianxing. However, Ji Tianxing did not take him seriously at all. He did not even use the burial of heaven, and simply pointed his finger. Heaven-piercing finger. He put his right index and middle fingers together, forming a sword finger, and emitted a sacred white light. Kacha. With a crisp sound, the 100-feet-long blazing white sword radiance shattered the 100-feet-long deathly saber radiance. The deathly saber radiance turned into black fragments that covered the sky and scattered in the night sky like a rainstorm. That 30-meter-long sacred sword gleam did not weaken in the slightest as it ruthlessly stabbed Wu Su. Bam! With a dull sound, the sacred sword radiance pierced through Wu Su's chest, destroying his organs. Then Wu Su's physical body shattered like a mirror, exploding into pieces that filled the sky. Not only was his body destroyed, his soul was also destroyed and shattered into dozens of pieces. A second-degree devil saint was turned into ashes, and his bones were shattered into pieces. He could not even block Ji Tianxing's casual move. Seeing this scene with his own eyes, Ma Tuo was so scared that his face changed dramatically, and his eyes flashed with deep fear. He no longer had any intention to fight, and turned to escape without hesitation. Swoosh! A black radiance flashed, and Ba Tuo's figure disappeared into the darkness. The next moment, he escaped from the underground palace, and appeared in the sky above the city lord's residence. Chapter 2439. Swoosh! With a flash of white light, Ji Tianxing appeared in the night and blocked Ba Tuo's path. The night was as dark as ink and a cold wind blew. Ba Tuo's heart was filled with fear and panic. When he saw Ji Tianxing appear, he turned around and ran in another direction without hesitation. As for attacking Ji Tianxing, he did not even dare to think about it. Not to mention him, even the great devil saint Ling Xian was not Ji Tianxing's match. Only the ancestor demon god had the confidence to kill Ji Tianxing. If he dared to attack Ji Tianxing, he would die here tonight. In order to escape Star Moon City and shake off Ji Tianxing's pursuit, he did not hesitate to use the blood escape secret skill. Swoosh! With a flash of red light, Ba Tuo disappeared into thin air and was about to escape into another space. In the next moment, he was about to teleport 300 miles away and escape Star Moon City. However, something that Ba Tuo did not expect happened. Kacha! Ji Tianxing formed a seal with both hands, and his palms emitted a holy white light as he grabbed at the night sky in front of him. The night sky in a 10-mile radius was shattered and the space was in chaos. Without a doubt, Ba Tuo's teleportation had been interrupted. He was forcefully squeezed out by the power of the space and rolled into the city governor's mansion. A huge hole was smashed into the majestic and dignified palace, and countless pieces of earth and stone flew everywhere. Ba Tuo was injured and blood flowed out of his mouth and nose as he panted heavily. However, the injuries and pain on his body could not suppress the fear in his heart. Oh my God! Ji Tianxing, this bastard! He actually broke the space and interrupted my blood escape secret skill? How did he do it? Has he broken through the martial sage realm and reached the divine realm? Ba Tuo knew that a martial sage realm elite could not do it so easily. Only an unparalleled martial god could do it. At this thought, Ba Tuo was even more terrified and desperate. Just as Ba Tuo's mind was racing and he was inwardly shocked, a giant palm of white light that blotted out the sun slammed down from the sky. The mountain-sized palm was condensed from holy white light and contained an indestructible and purifying power. Boom! Just as Ba Tuo was about to rush out of the ruins, he was hit by the giant divine palm. The unstoppable divine power instantly destroyed the entire city lord's mansion, turning hundreds of houses and palaces into ruins. A 1,000-meter-deep crater was left on the spot, with a radius of several tens of miles. Garrisoned in the city lord's mansion were over 30 demon generals, over 1,000 elite guards, and over 100 scouts and messengers. However, 90% of them were killed by Ji Tianxing's palm. Only a few demon generals and a few dozen demon guards were left, and they were lying in the ruins with heavy injuries, screaming in pain. Ba Tuo was also heavily injured. His entire body was covered in blood as he lay at the bottom of the pit, covered in dust and sand. All the bones in his body were broken and shattered. His internal organs and meridians were also shattered. His strength was extremely weak. With such heavy injuries, he knew that he would not be able to escape tonight. Therefore, he ignored his injuries and hurriedly took out a communication jade slip and sent it to the ancestral fiend celestial. Whoosh! When the jade slip turned into a beam of bloody light and shot into the night sky, Ba Tuo finally let out a sigh of relief. He hurriedly took out a talisman, wanting to use this sacred grade space escape talisman to escape Xingyue City. Swoosh! When he injected his magic power into the talisman immediately ignited with bloody fire, bursting with powerful spatial power. However, before the spatial power could envelop Ba Tuo, a 1,000-meter-tall holy sword slashed down from the sky. The 1,000-meter-tall blazing white sword was dazzling with divine power, containing the most sacred power. Kaboom! Ba Tuo could not dodge in time and was struck by the huge sword. His body exploded into pieces. Even his soul was turned to dust by the huge sword and scattered in the crater. After Ba Tuo was killed, his body ignited with bloody fire and turned into ashes. Demonic chi rose into the air and covered the sky. However, the white light from the huge holy sword quickly dispersed the demonic chi. Ba Tuo was also dead. Although he had the strength of a rank 6 martial sage, he was one of the best among the martial sages. However, in front of Ji Tianxing, he was still weak and could only be killed in an instant. After a while, the earth-shattering explosion dissipated. The entire Xingyue city descended into chaos. Countless demon race soldiers and demonized citizens ran around in panic, letting out fearful and angry roars. A large number of soldiers and guards rushed towards the city lord mansion to check on the situation. Many demon generals and experts rushed to Ji Tianxing without any regard for their own safety, besieging him. Ji Tianxing stood expressionlessly in the night sky. He waved the burial of heaven sword and slashed out sword radiance. He waved his palm and shot out divine light that covered the sky. All kinds of divine abilities and supreme sword techniques poured into the city like a flood, wantonly slaughtering the demon race army. Wherever the holy white light shrouded, all the demons were reduced to dust and ashes. Ji Tianxing faced the hundreds of thousands of demon race soldiers alone but did not retreat at all. He was like a god that ruled over all life. With a flick of his finger, he could kill thousands of demon race soldiers. However, the attacks of the demon race soldiers could not even break through the protective holy light around him. This was a massacre with a great disparity in strength. Ji Tianxing used a full 4 hours to exterminate the 600,000-strong devil army. He only killed over 500,000 of them. The remaining tens of thousands of demon race soldiers were scared out of their wits and fled in all directions. The demon generals of the entire army were all killed by him. Only 2 or 3 of them were lucky enough to survive. Even among the 400,000 demonized citizens, 100,000 of them had died in the battle. After the battle subsided, Ji Tianxing used the Xiantian demon suppression art and released an earth-shattering holy shockwave that enveloped the entire city. Without exception, all the demonized citizens trapped in the city fainted from the shockwave. Most of the demon qi in their bodies dissipated. Ji Tianxing used another 4 hours to purify all the citizens with the help of the heaven-mending orb. Although Yunyao had once reminded him that there was not much point in doing so, after the citizens were purified, they would also become homeless refugees. Most of them would wander around and be slaughtered by the demon race or demonized again. However, Ji Tianxing thought that even if only a few tens of thousands of citizens could survive in the end, it would be worth it. After dealing with this matter, he did not stay any longer. He left Xingyue City as fast as lightning. After a short 2 hours, he returned to Taiyuan City. When he entered the city lord's mansion, the seventh god's child was pacing back and forth in the study. He looked anxious and worried. When he saw Ji Tianxing return, he was immediately energized and hurried to greet him. "Young Master Ji, you're back so soon? Have you found Jiu? How's the situation in Xingyue City?" Ji Tianxing nodded and said calmly, "Jiu and the fourth god's child have been rescued by him. In addition, the 2 demon saints stationed in Xingyue City and the 600,000 demon race soldiers were also destroyed by me." Chapter 2440. At that moment, the seventh prince almost thought he had misheard. He couldn't believe that Ji Tianxing had accomplished so many feats in such a short time. Not only did he break into Xingyue City and rescue Jiu and the fourth prince, he also killed 2 demon saints and slaughtered 600,000 demon soldiers. That was too terrifying. The seventh prince believed that only an overlord like his father could create such a miracle. Ji Tianxing didn't say much. He opened the sword world and released Jiu and the fourth prince. Whoosh, whoosh. A white light flashed, and Jiu and the fourth prince appeared in the study. Both of them wore ragged clothes, and their bodies were covered in blood and wounds. They seemed to be in a sorry and miserable state. Fortunately, they had rested for a few hours in the sword world and recovered a little. They also treated most of their wounds. Otherwise, their injuries would be even more miserable and unbearable to look straight at. The seventh prince heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Jiu and the fourth prince, but he was also filled with pity and anger. He was glad that Ji Tianxing had saved Jiu and the fourth god's child from the devil's nest. However, the 2 of them had suffered such serious injuries and looked so miserable. He was extremely angry and hated the demon race to the extreme. The 3 siblings were very excited and relieved to be reunited. The seventh god's son pulled the 2 of them aside and inquired about their situation. Ji Tianxing didn't stay any longer and left quietly. He returned to his residence and meditated for a few hours. The next morning, he left Taiyuan City with Yun Yao. Saving Jiu and the fourth prince was just a small interlude. He didn't forget that he had come to the vast divine nation to seek revenge from the ancestor fiend celestial. He still had to kill more demon generals and soldiers to force the ancestor fiend celestial to show up. For the next half a month, Ji Tianxing had been wandering around the battlefront. Wherever there was a devil race legion, where devil race experts and generals were stationed, that would be his target. His plan to kill the leader was no longer a conspiracy. It had become an open one. With their unparalleled strength, he and Yun Yao did not need to hide. They directly charged into the demon camp. After killing the experts and generals of the devil race, they still had to slaughter a large number of the devil army. If the ancestral fiend god did not show himself, no one could stop his massacre. In just a dozen days, Ji Tianxing and his wife had destroyed 8 demon camps and 6 demon legions, totaling over 2 million demon soldiers. Among them were more than 300 demon generals, more than 200 blood gods, and a new demon saint. This was the 4th devil saint that Ji Tianxing had killed. Of the 5 devil saints under the ancestral devil god, only the great devil Saint Ling Xian was still alive. In addition, Ji Tianxing had saved more than 1 million demonized humans. Such a heavy blow caused the demons to suffer disastrous losses and their morale to plummet. For a time, the demon army was in a state of panic. More than a dozen legions withdrew their defenses and retreated to the north. The demons' southward advance was halted, and their plan to completely occupy the boundless divine kingdom was foiled. Such outstanding results made the 7 Shensi and many human generals cry out in disbelief. The morale of the human army was also high, and they were ready to fight. They swore to protect the territory of the boundless divine kingdom. During this time, Ji Tianxing met with the 7 Shensi again. He asked the 7 Shensi to help him collect and investigate information about the God Orb. The 7 Shensi certainly did not refuse and would do his best to complete the task. Ji Tianxing and his wife rested in Taiyuan City for a day before embarking on their journey again to continue the execution of the plan. This time, his target was the Heavenly Cloud City, which was 200,000 miles north of Taiyuan City. That was the capital of the Outcloud Empire. When Ji Tianxing had first entered the Shenwu continent, he had participated in the God-disciple selection in the Heavenly Cloud City. He had entered Mount Godseal as the top genius of the Outcloud Empire. He was not unfamiliar with that city. Late at night, the sky was dark and moonless. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were flying high in the sky on the fiery glass dragon. The fiery glass dragon had been flying for 12 hours, and they would arrive at the Heavenly Cloud City in another hour at most. Ji Tianxing looked calmly at the night sky in front of him and said to Yun Yao, "I killed many demon generals before and used a secret soul-searching technique to obtain some information. After the demon army occupied the Heavenly Cloud City, they used it as their headquarters for their southern expedition. They stored a large number of soldiers and resources. It is said that the great demon Saint Ling Xian is in the Heavenly Cloud City and has the most powerful army under his command. There are millions of demons. In the past half a month, a large number of demons have retreated to the north. Some of them must have retreated to the vicinity of the Heavenly Cloud City." After listening to his words, Yun Yao nodded and said in a serious tone, "So, the number of demons in the Heavenly Cloud City is far more than 1,000,000? If we kill the great demon Saint Ling Xian tonight and wipe out the rest of the demon army, half of the demon army will be wiped out. What's more, with the first demon god's demon saints dead, there will be no generals to command. The army will collapse without a fight." Ji Tianxing nodded and said in a solemn voice, "Correct? So long as our plan succeeds, the demon army will be defeated. With no generals to command, the first demon god will be defeated and forced to return to Dark North Mountain. But if we can think of this, so can the first demon god. So, I am 80% sure that the first demon god will appear tonight to stop us." Yun Yao frowned and muttered in a low voice, "That is possible. But we have been fighting for so long and the first demon god has not shown himself. Before Buddha died, he sent a message to the first demon god, but there was no response. I have a feeling the first demon god is up to something. We have to be careful." Ji Tianxing's lips curled into a smile and he nodded. "Of course we have to be careful. But right now we are the ones slaughtering the demon army and forcing the first demon god to show himself. No matter what the first demon god is up to, so long as he shows himself, I will not let him go." Time passed as the two of them talked. Half an hour later, the dragon reached the outskirts of Skycloud City. It hovered over a mountain range. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao stood on the dragon's back, looking out at the city 300 kilometers away. Their eyes were cold and sharp. Skycloud City at night was shrouded in a black fog. It was eerie and deathly still. Faint crimson lights flickered through the fog and demonic energy. Ji Tianxing released his divine sense and quickly saw the situation in the city. All of Skycloud was covered by a saint-grade array. The city gates were closed and a large number of demon warriors stood guard on the city walls. It was under martial law. Many of the city's buildings had been converted into demon barracks. Other than that, there was nothing out of the ordinary. "Let's go." Ji Tianxing waved his hand and motioned for the dragon to fly forward and enter the city. Yun Yao remained silent, looking as if she was deep in thought. Suddenly she frowned and said in a serious voice, "Wait, Tianxing, I have a bad feeling about this." Chapter 24:41. Although Ji Tianxing's divine power had a great restraining effect on demonic power, Ji Tianxing's divine power had a great restraining effect. He was the demon's nemesis. However, Yun Yao was more sensitive to demonic energy and demonic aura. Since she had a bad feeling, it was proof that something was wrong with Skycloud. Ji Tianqing hurriedly stopped and said with a solemn expression, "All right, I'll use my divine sense to check again." Yun Yao nodded. Silently she unsheathed her twin swords and stood guard at his side. Ji Tianqing released his formless divine sense, which spread out like quicksilver, enveloping the entire city in a careful examination. All of the buildings, streets, and alleys in the city within a radius of 150 kilometers were reflected in his mind. Where the guards were hidden, where the army was stationed, where the traps and ambushes were laid out, it was all clear to him. Even the imperial palace, which was heavily guarded and had the strongest defense, could not block the probing of his divine sense. It didn't take long for him to discover that there were hundreds of demonic generals and tens of thousands of elite guards. In the depths of the palace there was also the aura of a demon saint. He was no stranger to it. It was the great demon saint Ling Xian. Half an hour later, Ji Tianqing had learned everything about the city. Only then did he withdraw his consciousness. He turned to look at Yun Yao with a puzzled expression. "I've already scanned the city. There's nothing out of the ordinary. Ling Xian is overseeing the city. He has an army of 1,300,000 demonic soldiers under his command, as well as 700,000 demonized civilians. The number of blood gods and generals has reached 300 as well. It's an impregnable stronghold, filled with experts." Yun Yao frowned and asked worriedly, "Did you not detect the aura of the ancestral devil god? Or is there an ambush in the city?" Ji Tianqing shook his head. Yun Yao hesitated. After a moment she spoke in a serious voice. "Tianqing, we're already in Skycloud. There's no need to rush. Let's wait outside for a few hours. It won't be too late for us to enter the city at dawn." Ji Tianqing did not care if there was an ambush in the city. The reason he carried out the beheading plan was to force the ancestral fiend god to show himself. If the ancestral devil god was in the city, that would be exactly what he wanted. However, Yun Yao insisted on acting cautiously. He would not act rashly, so he nodded and agreed. "All right, then we'll do as you say. We'll observe for a few hours." Then, Yun Yao put away the glazed fire dragon. She and Ji Tianqing retracted their auras and used the invisibility technique to escape into the darkness. The two of them hid outside the city walls, blending in with the darkness as they watched. Time passed silently as the two of them waited patiently. Skycloud was as calm as ever, with nothing out of the ordinary. Unknowingly, 4 hours had passed. Dawn was coming, and the sky was about to brighten. Yun Yao's brows furrowed as she thought to herself, "There's been no movement in the city, nothing out of the ordinary. Am I overthinking things? Too nervous?" At this moment, a spiritual light suddenly lit up in the night sky behind the two of them. Whoosh! The white light cut through the night sky and flew to Ji Tianqing in an instant, falling into his palm. In this way, his and Yun Yao's location was exposed. If there were experts secretly watching, they would have discovered this situation. Ji Tianqing lowered his head to take a look and saw that there was a communication jade slip in his palm. Judging from the mark, it was from the seventh god's son. He injected his divine sense into the jade slip, and the seventh god's son's voice immediately sounded in his mind. "Mr. Ji, I have good news for you. Tonight, the father has finally completed his cultivation and has come out of seclusion. I have already informed the father of what happened before, as well as your plan. The father is very happy to hear the news. He will personally come to Taiyuan City to thank you in person and discuss the plan to eliminate the demons." The seventh god's son's tone was quite excited, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders, but also full of anticipation. It seemed that he believed that if martial god Taihao and Ji Tianqing worked together, they would definitely be able to defeat the demons and kill the ancestor demon god. Ji Tianqing put away the jade slip, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. Yun Yao looked at him with concern and quickly asked, "Tianqing, is this a message from the seventh god's son? What happened?" Ji Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, The seventh god's son sent me a message saying that martial god Taihao has finally completed his cultivation and has successfully come out of seclusion. Martial god Taihao knows that I'm assassinating the demons, so he wants to meet me in Taiyuan City to thank me in person and discuss the plan to eliminate the demons. Hearing this, Yun Yao was immediately energized. She quickly nodded and said, "That's great. We don't have to fight alone anymore. With the help of martial god Taihao, we will definitely be able to kill the ancestor demon god and make sure that the demons will never return." As soon as Yun Yao finished speaking, a dark red light suddenly appeared in the night sky not far away. Swoosh! The red light tore through the night sky and a huge gap appeared. A burly figure, 20 feet tall and shrouded in a black robe, stepped out of the gap in the void. The black-robed figure was surrounded by demonic energy and emitted a cold aura of death. It had 3 large heads, 4 thick arms, and 6 pairs of blade-like black wings on its back. There was no doubt that it was the ancestor demon god, who had shrunk 1,000 times. "Ha ha ha! You bitch, how arrogant of you! I'd like to see who's the one who won't return tonight." The ancestor demon god's body stood proudly in the night sky. Its eyes were fixed on Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao's hiding place, and it sneered in a mocking tone. A muffled sound like thunder broke the silence of the night sky. At the same time, thousands of lights lit up in the silent heavenly cloud city. Tens of thousands of demon warriors rushed out of the city like a tide toward Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao immediately understood what was going on. Clearly, the ancestor demon god had arrived in Heavenly Cloud City a long time ago, but had been hiding in a different dimension. The seemingly calm Heavenly Cloud City had been prepared for an ambush, ready to strike at any moment. Ji Tianxing turned his head and looked at Yun Yao beside him. He nodded at her with a look of approval. Yun Yao nodded and looked at the ancestor demon god with serious eyes. Her hands clenched around her twin swords. Now that their invisibility had been seen through, the two of them decided to stop hiding and reveal themselves in the night sky. Ji Tianxing looked at the ancestor demon god with sharp eyes and said in a cold voice, "Ancestor demon god, in the past month I've killed nearly 3 million demons. Among them were hundreds of blood gods and generals, as well as 4 demon saints. You've suffered such heavy losses, yet you've been hiding, not daring to show your face. You've set up a trap in Heavenly Cloud City, waiting for me to walk right into it. You didn't dare to show yourself until I entered the city. When you heard that Taihao had come out of seclusion and that I was going to join forces with him, you jumped out." Chapter 2442. The ancestor Fian Celestial's sudden appearance confirmed Yun Yao's suspicions. Ji Tianxing was sure that there were traps and ambushes in Heavenly Cloud City. At the same time, he could guess why the ancestor Fian Celestial had appeared. He was afraid that he would turn around and leave to meet up with martial god Taihao in Taiyuan City. The ancestor Fian Celestial was not angry that Ji Tianxing had exposed him. Instead, he grinned coldly. "Ji Tianxing, you have been assassinating my soldiers everywhere, but I have not shown up to stop you. Do you think I am afraid of you? What a joke. To tell you the truth, ever since I killed my way into Taihao Kingdom, I have killed nearly 500 million people. Among them, nearly 200 million warriors had their blood, qi, and souls absorbed by me, becoming nourishment for me to increase my strength. All this time, I have been cultivating in seclusion to nurture the limitless heavenly demon body. Now, not only have I cultivated the limitless heavenly demon body, but I have also reached the 3rd level of the martial god realm. Can you still laugh now? Ha 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 ha." The ancestor Fian Celestial spoke the truth without hesitation. At the end, he threw his head back and laughed arrogantly. When Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao heard this, they immediately frowned and their expressions became more serious. At the same time, the great demon saint Ling Xian personally led 20,000 elite demon warriors from Heavenly Cloud City. Swoosh! Swoosh! In the dark night sky, There were flickering figures and surging demon aura everywhere. In a short time, Ling Xian and the 20,000 elite demons surrounded Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. This area was completely surrounded, and the atmosphere in the field became cold and austere. The ancestor Fiend Celestial looked at the two of them complacently and grinned coldly. Now you cannot escape. Don't think you can see the light of tomorrow. With that, the ancestor Fiend Celestial waved his hand and shouted coldly, "Kill them!" Following the ancestor Fiend Celestial's order, Ling Xian and the 20,000 elite demons let out a roar that shook the heavens. Everyone waved their swords and halberds and roared at the top of their lungs. Demonic light and blood light covered the sky and the sun. All kinds of magic light and shadows, as well as the shadows of asuras and demons, filled the entire night sky. The darkness was dispelled, and the world became blood-red. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were surrounded, but they were not afraid. Yun Yao was wearing the dark gold divine armor. She protected herself tightly and waved her shadowless dual swords to counterattack. Pulling stars and setting moon. Snowy mountains. Following her angry roar, the sky lit up with dazzling starlight, like snowflakes falling from the sky. Light pillars and giant blades that were hundreds and thousands of meters long fell like meteors and crescent moons, bombarding the crowd. Only loud rumbling noises could be heard, reverberating in the night sky. The brilliance of the stars collided with the demonic energy and the bloody light, bursting forth with dazzling splendor that blotted out the sky. Numerous demon warriors fell down in batches like wheat being cut. Blood splattered in the crowd, bones and corpses flew in all directions, and miserable shrieks rose and fell one after another. Although Ji Tianqing did not have a divine artifact to protect himself, he had the most special and powerful divine body in the world. He had the star divine body, the thunder god body, and the heavenly sword body. Demonic spells that blotted out the sky and covered the earth poured down on him like a rainstorm, making bang 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 sounds. However, he used his divine power to form a dazzling golden shield that blocked all the attacks, and he was not injured at all. Any martial artist below the martial god realm could not hurt a single hair on his body. He waved his left hand, and a dazzling golden divine power surged out of his palm. Like a flood, it covered an area of 50 miles. There were more than 6,000 demon warriors in that area. After being engulfed by the special divine power, they were turned into ashes on the spot. Their bodies of flesh and blood were burned into black ashes, and the dense demonic energy and black energy were also purified by the divine power. He held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and instantly slashed out 108 giant swords that were thousands of meters long, killing the crowd. Instantly, thousands of demon warriors died under the divine sword light and were turned into ashes. The great battle had just begun, and Ji Tianqing had only used 2 moves to kill more than 10,000 demon warriors. Such terrifying divine power was truly like a peerless god of death, and it made people tremble in fear. The tens of thousands of surviving Devil Clan members and the great Devil Saint Ling Xian were all dumbfounded, their eyes filled with fear. The ancestor Fiend Celestial was also stunned. The smug smile on his face froze, and it quickly became gloomy and ferocious. Kenshin, damned bastard! You actually recovered. Not long ago, he had exchanged blows with Ji Tianqing. In the end, both sides suffered great losses, and Ji Tianqing was heavily injured and had fled in a sorry state. The ancestor Fiend Celestial had predicted that Ji Tianqing would need at least 2 years to break through to the God realm. However, he had never expected that Ji Tianqing would break through to the God realm in less than a year. Furthermore, he could tell that Ji Tianqing was not as simple as breaking through to the God realm. He had also recovered the glory of Kenshin in the past, grasping the supreme sword Dao, and could use the world-destroying divine power with a flick of his finger. At this moment, Ji Tianqing was several times stronger than Kenshin in the past. How could the ancestor Fiend Celestial not be shocked? Haha! Isn't it too late to realize it now? If not, why would I slaughter the demon army and force you to show yourself? Ji Tianxing sneered. As he replied to the ancestor fiend celestial, he waved his fist and sword, using his divine power. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. He waved his left fist, and a dragon elephant phantom the size of a mountain emitted a bright golden light and blasted into the demon army. The divine elephant was as majestic as a mountain, while the divine dragon was noble and dignified. The combination of the two had unparalleled power. Bam! Amidst a loud explosion, more than 2,000 demon elites were smashed into pieces by the dragon elephant divine fist. Pieces of flesh and blood that blotted out the sky rained down on the wasteland like a rainstorm, dyeing the ground dark red. In just 3 breaths, 70% of the 20,000 elite demon warriors had been slaughtered by Ji Tianxing and his wife. The remaining 5,000 were scared out of their wit. They hurriedly retreated and fled toward Heavenly Cloud City. Even the great demon Saint Ling Xian was hit by the remaining power of the dragon elephant divine fist. He flew back with blood spurting out of his 7 orifices. He was severely injured. Thus, only Ji Tianxing, his wife, and the ancestor fiend celestial were left in the night sky within 100 miles. The ancestor fiend celestial regained his senses and roared furiously. He finally attacked. Lowly beast! Bastard! Even if I grind your bones to dust, I won't be able to vent my anger. As he roared, the ancestor fiend celestial's body emitted a bloody light and demonic chi. He revealed his mountain-like true form. Roar! Black fog filled the sky and bloody light surged. A pitch-black beast 10,000 meters tall appeared. This was the ancestor fiend celestial's true form. Moreover, he had cultivated the limitless heavenly demon physique, and his appearance had changed. His 4 sharp claws became narrower and sharper, like the claws of an eagle. The 12 wings on his back also became sharper and curved, flashing with a frightening cold light. Great heavenly demon palm! The ancestor fiend celestial roared. He raised his 4 palace-sized claws and slammed them down from the sky. Chapter 24:43. The 4 heavenly demon palms contained the power to destroy heaven and earth. The giant palms smashed down, shattering the night sky and shattering the earth for hundreds of miles. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao were under the terrifying pressure. They found it difficult to breathe and their blood almost froze. At this critical moment, Yun Yao desperately urged the power of the mystic armor to defend herself. Ji Tianxing was fearless. He looked up at the ancestor demon god with a cold face and stabbed the sword in his right hand into the sky. Break! As he shouted coldly, endless divine power gushed out of his body and poured into the heaven barrier's sword. The sword of burial of heaven also burst with extreme power. 4 dazzling golden swords thousands of feet long shot up with the power to destroy everything. Kaboom! In an earth-shattering sound, the 4 giant swords and the heavenly demon palms collided, creating a violent shock wave. The golden swords and the heavenly demon palms collapsed at the same time, turning into millions of light fragments that spread in all directions. Swoosh! The shock wave of gold and black intertwined and covered 1,000 miles in the blink of an eye. In an instant, hundreds of miles of wilderness and mountains outside the city were razed to the ground, turning into ravines and ruins. Not far away, Heavenly Cloud City was hit by the shock wave and immediately activated the city's defensive array. Originally, the defensive array was only a saint-level array set up by Ling Xian. The shock wave was so powerful that it shattered the defensive array in an instant. However, the ancestor demon god had set up traps and ambushes in Heavenly Cloud City to kill Ji Tianxing. 2 invisible divine arrays were activated on the spot. 2 blood-red shields with a radius of 300 miles lit up. The blood-red shields blocked the shock wave and only trembled, but didn't collapse. Heavenly Cloud City was saved and wasn't damaged. The over 1 million devilish army garrisoned in the city also managed to escape unscathed. If it weren't for the 2 divine arrays, the entire city would have been reduced to ruins by the shock wave. The thousands of demon warriors who had fled back to the city all revealed smiles of relief after surviving a calamity. The great devil Saint Ling Xian also had a lingering fear in his heart. Ignoring his own injuries, he hurriedly commanded the city guards to maintain the operation of the divine array. 100,000 soldiers sprang into action. They poured magic into the formation, desperately trying to protect the city. At the same time, the battle outside the city became even more dangerous and intense. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao worked together to besiege the ancestral devil god. They fought a fierce battle high up in the sky, causing the heavens to crumble and the earth to rend. Yun Yao was only half a step into the divine realm. She could only pose a threat to the ancestral demon god by relying on the power of the shadowless dual sword. However, the ancestral Fian Celestial's attack was extremely dangerous to her. If she was not careful, she could lose her life. Fortunately, with the protection of the dark golden divine armor, she was able to withstand the ancestral Fian Celestial's attacks and neutralize all kinds of fiendish divine arts. Even so, she was still defending more than attacking. Most of the time, they were on the defense. Occasionally, they would find an opportunity to attack and assist Ji Tianxing. Only Ji Tianxing was fearless. He attacked openly and used all kinds of divine arts to force the ancestral Fiend Celestial to retreat. Although he was only a first-level martial god, his cultivation realm was lower than the ancestral Fiend Celestial's. However, he had a special divine power and a special divine body. His true combat strength was not weaker than the ancestral Fiend Celestial's. What made the ancestral Fiend Celestial most frustrated was that Ji Tianxing's divine power contained the power of holy light. It was the best counter to fiendish divine arts and demonic power. Moreover, Ji Tianxing's body was filled with the blood of a divine king. His bloodline was incomparably noble and innately suppressed the ancestral Fiend Celestial. Because of this, the ancestral Fiend Celestial was at a disadvantage and was forced into a passive state. In a short span of 100 breaths, the two sides had exchanged 600 blows. As the ancestral Fiend Celestial continued to retreat, the battlefield shifted 1,000 miles to the south. It was getting further and further away from Heavenly Cloud City. Finally, Ji Tianxing seized an opportunity. The ancestral Fiend Celestial was casting a spell to block the attacks of the shadowless dual swords. At the same time, he was waving his giant claws to counterattack Yun Yao. At this moment, Ji Tianxing did not hesitate to swing the Sword of Burial of Heaven and use his ultimate secret technique. Sword piercing heaven. He held the Sword of Burial of Heaven with both hands and stabbed it at the ancestral Fiend Celestial with all his might. Buzz. The Sword of Burial of Heaven trembled violently and released a giant dark golden sword that was 1,000 feet long. It was pointed at the ancestral Fiend Celestial's head. The giant sword was so condensed that it seemed to be solid. The moment it appeared, it absorbed the power of the 5 elements and stars within 10,000 miles. The giant sword instantly pierced through the night sky and disappeared. In the next moment, the giant sword traversed 50 miles and appeared behind the ancestral Fiend Celestial. The ancestral Fiend Celestial was shocked. He sensed the aura of death approaching and felt a chill in his heart. However, the giant sword was only 1,000 feet away from his head. It was too late for him to teleport away. At this critical moment, he could only activate the limitless heavenly demon body and unleash his most powerful defense. His left head immediately lit up with a pitch-black cold light and formed a shield. At the same time, densely packed scales appeared on the surface of the skull. Those were the Azura scales. Azuras were the Fiend Celestials with the strongest strength and defense in the Fiend Celestials. They were best at close combat. Kaboom! The moment the Azura scales appeared, The dark golden giant sword pierced the ancestral Fien Celestial's head and exploded with a loud sound that shook the 9 heavens. It was like the explosion of divine thunder that resounded through the clouds. Suddenly, the black light shield was smashed into pieces by the giant sword, splashing out fragments all over the sky. Following that, the giant sword destroyed the Azura scales and pierced through the ancestral Fien Celestial's left head. Bam! The dark golden giant sword's power was finally exhausted and it shattered into pieces. However, the ancestral Fien Celestial's left head was pierced with a huge bloody hole. Purple blood gushed out from it. The hole was so big that it took up half of his head and destroyed his entire demonic face. The ancestral Fien Celestial's head was destroyed and could not be recovered in a short period of time. The heart-wrenching pain caused the ancestral Fien Celestial to tremble as he roared crazily at the sky. Pieces of flesh and purple blood fell from the sky and corroded the ground into pitch-black scorched earth. The ancestral Fien Celestial did not expect such an outcome and could not accept it. As an unparalleled great Fien Celestial, how could he be seriously injured by a lowly human? This was an absolute humiliation. However, the ancestral Fien Celestial did not expect that this was only the beginning of the pain. Ji Tianqing's meticulously prepared killer move was far more than this. Swish! Just as the ancestral Fien Celestial was roaring furiously, a dazzling golden light flashed in the night sky. That golden light was only the size of a fingernail. Compared to the ancestral Fien Celestial's 10,000-meter body, it was so small that it could be ignored. However, the power of that golden light was enough to make him tremble in fear. The next moment, the golden light pierced through the alternate space and crossed the night sky, appearing behind the ancestral Fien Celestial. He had just been startled awake and wanted to lower his head to dodge, but he was pierced by the golden light. Bam! With a dull sound, a 3-inch dark golden flying dagger pierced through the scales and flesh on the right side of his head. Under Ji Tianqing's control, the flying dagger instantly expanded by 1,000 times. It expanded to 100 meters long and exploded with the most violent power. The result was undeniable. Chapter 2444. The ancestor Fien Celestial's left and right heads were destroyed, and its injuries worsened. The huge bloody hole made it unrecognizable as demonic blood gushed out. The heart-wrenching pain caused it to scream and roar in anger. However, it was full of vigilance, afraid that Ji Tianqing would take the opportunity to launch another sneak attack. Up until now, it had used all of its abilities over and over again. In the end, it still could not defeat Ji Tianqing. Instead, it ended up in such a state. It had already thought of retreating. After a few feints, it turned around and fled into the distance. Swoosh! With a flash of bloody light, it teleported 150 kilometers away, leaving Ji Tianqing far behind. Immediately after, it used the space diversion divine power to tear apart the sky in front of it. Swoosh! A crack appeared in the dark sky, and it was filled with endless darkness. The ancestor Fien Celestial did not hesitate to step into it. After passing through more than 10 layers of alternate spaces, it escaped 1,500 kilometers away. Ji Tianqing had just caught up when the crack in the void closed. He had lost the ancestor Fien Celestial's aura, so it was extremely difficult to chase after it. He even released his divine senses to scan the surrounding 1,500 kilometers, but he could not find any trace of the ancestor Fien Celestial. This was the limit of his divine senses. The ancestor Fien Celestial had teleported 1,500 kilometers away. Of course, it had escaped. There was no way to chase after it. Ji Tianqing had no choice but to give up on chasing after it. He turned around and flew to Yun Yao's side. "Yao Yao, are you injured?" He looked at Yun Yao with concern and observed her injuries. Fortunately, Yun Yao's divine armor was strong enough and was not damaged at all. She had only suffered internal injuries, but it was nothing serious. Her life was not in danger. Tianxing, I'm fine. Don't worry. Yun Yao waved her hand, indicating to Ji Tianxing that he did not need to worry. Seeing that she was fine, Ji Tianxing was relieved. Dawn had passed, and the sky gradually brightened. Dawn also rose in the eastern horizon. Ji Tianxing turned to look in the direction of Skycloud. His face was expressionless. The archdemon escaped. It's a shame we couldn't kill it. However, the demons in Heavenly Cloud cannot be allowed to live. With that, he led Yun Yao toward Skycloud. Before long they were back outside Skycloud. Skycloud City was still protected by the Crimson Shield. 100,000 soldiers were doing their best to maintain the operation of the Great Defensive Formation. The situation in the city could be clearly seen. More than 1 million demon soldiers and hundreds of thousands of demonized civilians were all armed and ready for battle. Seeing that the demon race army had not fled, Ji Tianxing felt slightly relieved. Ling Xian isn't stupid. Defending Skycloud is the right thing to do. If I lose to the ancestral fiend god, there is no need for the devil army to flee. If I defeat the ancestral devil god, it would be useless for them to escape. Once they leave Skycloud's protection, I'll slaughter them all. Ji Tianxing muttered to himself. His lips curved in a mocking smirk. But the first demon god is gone. Even if the demon army stays in Skycloud, they're doomed. With that, he gripped the sword of Burial of Heaven and flew to the southern gates. He hovered proudly in the air above. He looked down at the Crimson Shield from above. His pupils turned golden as he used his mystic sight to observe the city's defensive formation. The demon soldiers near the southern gates stared at him warily. Their eyes were filled with shock and fear. When they saw him emerge unscathed, and the archdemon god nowhere to be seen, the demons could guess the result. Without a doubt, the archdemon god had lost. Suddenly, the crowd was in an uproar. Countless demons whispered to each other, their faces filled with fear and unease. Even when the demon generals ordered their soldiers to remain silent, it was to no avail. Morale was shaken, and the demons' last shred of confidence was crumbling. Unless the archdemon god appeared, there was no turning back. Panic and panic spread through the demon army and gradually spread into the city. Half an hour later, Ji Tianxing broke through the divine formation and started casting spells to break the formation. By this time, news of the archdemon's defeat had spread throughout Skycloud. The demon army of more than 1 million fell into panic and worry. Many demon generals were at a loss. The ordinary demon race warriors were even more terrified and had thoughts of retreating. Boom! With a thunderous boom, Ji Tianxing wielded the sword of Burial of Heaven and fiercely slashed at the bloody barrier. A large gap appeared on the tough and thick blood-red shield, and dense cracks extended in all directions. Shwa! Ji Tianxing's figure flickered. Burial of Heaven in hand, he stepped through the gap and charged into the city. Yun Yao followed close behind. Clad in her dark golden armor and clutching her twin swords, she charged into the city. A fierce battle immediately unfolded. Shwa! Ji Tianxing stepped into the air and swung the sword of Burial of Heaven with his right hand. A dazzling golden sword light hundreds of meters long was slashed out. Boom! The giant sword slashed at the southern gate, shattering the gate and the city walls within a radius of thousands of meters. More than 2,000 demon soldiers guarding the gate were killed on the spot. They were all smashed to pieces. Hundreds of surviving Devil Clan members screamed in fright, then turned around and fled. Yun Yao swung her sword again and slashed out a few more shadowless swords. Another series of muffled sounds rang out. The hundreds of demons were also reduced to ashes. Not even their corpses were intact. With the destruction of the southern gate and the death of the 3,000 city guards, the one-sided massacre officially began. Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao pushed forward from the left and right. They used all kinds of sword techniques to kill all the demon soldiers in the city. Skycloud City immediately fell into chaos. Shocking roars and roars rang out in the city. There were also terrified and desperate curses. Many demon generals realized that if they continued to defend Skycloud City, they would be wiped out. Therefore, a large number of demon generals led the blood gods and elite warriors to besiege Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. They didn't expect to kill Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. They only hoped to stop them and buy time for the demon army to retreat. Two completely different scenes appeared in the chaotic Skycloud City. A large number of demon generals, blood gods, and elite warriors rushed to the southern gate from all directions. They risked their lives to stop Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao. The demon army, which was as numerous as the hairs on an ox, fled the southern part of the city. They rushed desperately to the northern gate and escaped from Skycloud City. Whoosh 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 whoosh. Ji Tianxing took the lead. He faced dozens of demon generals and blood gods alone. He swung his sword and sent out golden light that filled the sky. More than 600 dazzling golden sword lights formed a sword array that was 10 miles wide and fell from the sky. More than 40 demon generals and blood gods were enveloped by the sword array. They were quickly ground to dust. Those blood gods had special constitutions. They could recover even if they were ground to pieces. However, Ji Tianxing's divine power just happened to restrain them. Chapter 24:45. 15 minutes later, Ji Tianxing and Yun Yao had reached the city square. Hundreds of generals and 200 blood gods had come to stop them, but they had all been killed. In the process, more than 200,000 demon race soldiers also died under their sword. From the southern gate to the city square, the buildings and streets along the way had been reduced to rubble. The ground was littered with the remains of demon soldiers, and even the earth was soaked in demon blood. Soon, Ji Tianxing killed his way into one of the devil race's camp. An entire army of 600,000 demons had been stationed here. At this point, more than half of the devil army had already fled. There were only about 200,000 people left in the camp. Ji Tianxing hovered over the camp, clutching the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand. He pointed it toward the heavens and shouted, "Rain of swords!" Instantly, the sky lit up with a dazzling starlight. 10,000 points of starlight emerged. Tens of thousands of stellar swords rained down like a meteor shower, enveloping the entire demon race camp. Boom, 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 boom. The massive starry swords came crashing down, covering a radius of 50 miles. An earth-shattering sound rang out. In the blink of an eye, the demon camp had been reduced to rubble, leaving only a deep crater in its wake. More than 200,000 demons had been reduced to nothing. Not a single corpse was left intact. The force of the impact was so great that it shook the entire city. The ground cracked open, and countless fissures opened up in its wake. The large group of devil army that was fleeing was also thrown off their feet by the shockwave. This was the power of a war god. A single blow annihilated more than 200,000 demons. Such power was enough to destroy the heavens and earth. Millions of demons were scared out of their wits when they witnessed this horrifying scene with their own eyes. They were even more panicked. They rushed toward the northern gate, crowding it so tightly that not even a drop of water could trickle through. Seeing this scene, the demon general guarding the northern gate promptly gave the order to close the great city barrier formation. Whoosh! Once the crimson barrier was gone, the sky above the northern gate was clear. Many demon soldiers didn't have time to escape through the city gates, so they took to the skies and fled. Ji Tianxing was currently using his divine ability in the city, wantonly slaughtering the devil soldiers. When he saw the situation at the north gate, he frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. "Yao Yao, I'll leave the demons in the city to you. I'll intercept them." He sent a telepathic message to Yun Yao. Then, he rushed to the top of the north city gate in a flash and started a massacre. 7-star sword. 5-colored divine lightning. Ji Tianxing brandished the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand, while his left hand unleashed an earth-shattering 5-colored divine thunder, which poured down on the demon army. With the northern city gate as the center, The area within a radius of 50 miles had turned into a lightning purgatory. Hundreds of thousands of the Devil Race army were engulfed by the monstrous lightning and immediately turned into ashes. The dazzling golden sword descended from the heavens and took the lives of tens of thousands of demons. Ji Tianqing turned his head and looked outside the city. He saw hundreds of thousands of demons fleeing across the wasteland north of the city like a black tide. Slowly, he raised his left fist. His entire arm glowed with golden light and he punched out with it. Dracophant fist. The image of a dracophant as large as a mountain fell from the sky like a dazzling golden sun. Boom! With an earth-shattering boom, the 300 miles of wasteland was reduced to rubble. It became a giant crater like an abyss. An endless cloud of dust rose into the air, covering the sky for thousands of miles. The destructive power of the explosion rushed into the earth, causing the earth to tremble for thousands of miles. The hundreds of thousands of demons who had fled the city thought they'd escaped with their lives. In the end, they couldn't escape their fate of being slaughtered. They were all reduced to ashes. After this attack, only 500,000 demons remained. They were still in the city, too late to escape. Seeing the hundreds of thousands of Devil Army soldiers that had escaped from the city being killed by Ji Tianqing with a single punch, they were all horrified and in complete despair. What's more, the ancestor demon god never showed himself. Demon Saint Lingxian was nowhere to be found. More than 100 generals had been killed. Without a leader, the demon army was in a state of disunity. They had no fighting power to speak of. Their fate was self-evident. 2 hours later, the earth-shattering slaughter was over. The smoke and dust that covered the sky, the demonic energy and black fog that had covered the sky, gradually dissipated. The loud rumbling sound reverberated in the sky and gradually faded away. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stood side by side in the sky above the city. They looked down at the scorched wasteland. Indeed, after nearly 2 hours of fighting, all of Skycloud City had been destroyed. Dozens of giant craters littered the land for thousands of miles. The ruins that were soaked in demonic blood had turned black and red, like scorched earth that had been burned by a raging fire. As far as the eye could see, the ground was littered with craters, ravines, and skeletons. Not a single complete corpse could be found. Skycloud City had been utterly destroyed. Not even the broken walls and bricks remained. But Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao didn't feel sorry. War was about destruction and destruction. It was a reality no one could escape. Even if they had to sacrifice all of Skycloud City, it would have been worth it to kill 1,600,000 demons. At worst, they could just wait until the war was over and rebuild. Unfortunately, the 700,000 demonized civilians had been caught in the crossfire and were almost completely wiped out. Ji Tianqing felt it was a pity, but there was nothing he could do about it. He stared calmly at the scorched earth. Yao Yao, Demon Saint Lingxian hasn't shown himself? Yun Yao nodded. Her voice was low. I've been in the city all this time. I haven't seen him. Ji Tianqing nodded, his expression indifferent. He's always been crafty and cunning. I'm sure he saw the situation was bad and ran away. Yun Yao sheathed her twin swords. It doesn't matter. He can hide for a while, but in the end he'll die. The main force of the demon army has been wiped out. Only 3 million soldiers remain, scattered across the front lines. The first demon god fled, wounded. 4 of the 5 great demon saints are dead. The demons are a sheet of loose sand, and will soon be defeated. After this battle, you've completely disrupted their plans to invade the divine kingdom of Taihao. You've also performed a miraculous service. For thousands of years, the divine kingdom of Taihao will be grateful for your kindness. Ji Tianqing shook his head and said regretfully, It's a pity that as long as the ancestral demon god is alive, the demon race will have the opportunity to stir up trouble. Yao Yao, you've been lightly injured. You've used up too much energy. Go back to the sword world to recover. I need to take advantage of the victory and find the first demon god, as soon as possible. I'll kill him once and for all. Yun Yao understood. Now that the first demon god was wounded, it was the perfect time to kill him. If they missed this opportunity, it would be even more difficult to kill the first demon god in the future. Thus, she nodded in agreement and said, "The boundless divine kingdom will take care of the aftermath. You only need to find the first demon god and kill him. Then this war will be over." Chapter 2446. Yun Yao entered the world within the sword and went into seclusion to recover. Ji Tianxing left the ruins of Heavenly Cloud City and flew north alone. Although he had used up a lot of his divine power and was a little tired after a series of battles, it was not a big deal. He was a martial god. He was already a peerless martial god and possessed a unique divine body. He could merge with heaven and earth and communicate with the stars in the sky. He did not need to cultivate at all. His divine body could absorb the power of heaven and earth and the stars at any time to replenish his divine power. After flying north for 3 days, his divine power was fully replenished and he was back to peak condition. During this time, he sent a message to the seventh god's child. He told the seventh god's child about the ancestor fiend god's defeat, the destruction of Heavenly Cloud City, and the destruction of the demon army. The seventh god's child was overjoyed. He could not believe it and was full of excitement. He hurriedly sent back a message saying that he had passed the news to Martial God Taihao and expressed his most sincere gratitude to Ji Tianxing. As for the aftermath, he would send someone to do it as soon as possible. Ji Tianxing did not need to worry. Knowing that Ji Tianxing wanted to take advantage of the victory and kill the ancestor fiend god, he also agreed and looked forward to it. Ji Tianxing flew north because he wanted to leave the divine kingdom of Taihao and rush to Dark North Mountain. He guessed that after the ancestor fiend god was seriously injured, he would most likely flee back to Dark North Mountain to hide and heal. As long as he could get to Dark North Mountain as soon as possible and find the ancestor fiend god, victory would be assured. Soon, 4 days passed. Ji Tianxing traveled continuously for 4 days and crossed half of the divine kingdom of Taihao and arrived at the northern border of the divine kingdom. With his current strength, using the Void Step's divine ability, his speed had reached an extremely shocking level. That evening, he flew past a main city on the border. Looking down from the sky, he saw that the 100,000 demon clan troops stationed in the city were moving north. Obviously, the demon army had also heard the news and decided to abandon the city and flee back to Dark North Mountain. Ji Tianxing immediately guessed that the 3 million demon army in the divine kingdom of Taihao were probably retreating. Since he was passing by and saw them, he would not be merciful. He casually used a divine power and cast a 5-colored lightning that covered the sky and poured down on the ground below. Boom, 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 boom. The lightning pillars that covered the sky covered a radius of 100 miles and blasted the entire main city into ruins. The 100,000 Devil Race soldiers were not spared either. They were instantly annihilated. Originally, their morale was low and they retreated unwillingly. They didn't expect a calamity to descend from the heavens and divine lightning to fill the sky. To the demon race army, such an outcome was akin to suffering the wrath of heaven, a divine punishment. By the time the earth-shattering explosion and the dust that covered the sky dissipated, Ji Tianxing was already far away. 8 days later, Ji Tianxing entered the northern Nether Mountain region. On the night of the 9th day, he arrived at the heart of the North Underworld Mountain and approached the North Underworld Palace. The night sky was as dark as ink, shrouded in black fog and devil chi. Not a trace of starlight could be seen. The world was cold and austere, and only the endless cold wind whistled. Ji Tianxing flew in the air and looked in front of him expressionlessly. The killing intent in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. However, when he was 2,000 miles away from Beiming Palace, he suddenly saw a bloody light in the night sky. Roar! following the appearance of the dazzling bloody light, there was a deep roar that sounded like thunder and was filled with anger. The deafening roar was like the awakening of an ancient ferocious beast or the roar of a peerless demon. Ji Tianqing was no stranger to this. His eyes immediately turned cold, and a hint of surprise flashed in his eyes. This is the voice of the ancestor fiend celestial. It really escaped back to Baiming Palace. However, it should be in seclusion to heal its injuries. Why is it roaring? Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and muttered doubtfully. At this moment, the sky in front of him lit up with a five-colored light and bloody fire that covered the sky. A series of loud rumbling noises came from the night sky. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing immediately understood that the ancestor fiend celestial was fighting with someone. Moreover, the other party must be a martial god expert. This is strange. Which martial god would arrive at Baiming Palace before me to assassinate the ancestor fiend celestial? Ji Tianqing was even more confused. He sped up. After a few breaths, he had crossed 2,000 miles of the night sky and arrived near Baiming Palace. Above the vast wasteland, two figures were fighting in the night sky. One of them was a huge black beast that was 10,000 meters tall. It looked terrifying and ferocious. It had 3 huge heads. It was the ancestor fiend celestial. To Ji Tianqing's disbelief, the bloody holes on its left and right heads had healed. On the surface, it looked like it had recovered and all the wounds on its body had disappeared. After careful observation, one could see that it had only recovered a small part of its injuries. It only had about 70% of its strength left and its aura was still a little chaotic. This result was in line with Ji Tianqing's expectations. After all, the ancestor fiend celestial had cultivated the limitless heavenly demon body. It had strong defense and insane recovery ability. Ji Tianqing turned to look at the other figure. It was the martial god who was fighting with the ancestor fiend celestial. It was a middle-aged man who was close to 10 feet tall. He was wearing starry silver armor and a cape with dragon patterns on his shoulders. He was burly and had a dignified face. He had thick eyebrows and big eyes. He had a domineering aura. Although he was as small as an ant compared to the ancestor fiend celestial, he had a martial god level. However, he possessed the strength of the LV6 martial god realm. He performed powerful and domineering divine powers and fought the ancestor fiend celestial to a standstill. Ji Tianqing was familiar with this martial god of the human clan. It was martial god Taihao. Seeing the situation in the night sky, Ji Tianqing's eyebrows relaxed and he curled his lips into a smile. This guy is really impatient. He actually reached Baiming Palace before me. At the same time, martial god Taihao and the ancestor fiend celestial sensed Ji Tianqing's arrival. Both sides exchanged a blow, and a shockwave that covered the sky burst forth. Both sides used the momentum to retreat, maintaining a distance of 50 kilometers as they faced each other in the night sky. Furthermore, both of them turned to look at Ji Tianqing with different expressions. The ancestor fiend celestial frowned fiercely. His expression became ferocious, and his 6 eyes were filled with bitter hatred. Martial god Taihao heaved a sigh of relief. It was as if he had regained his confidence, and he revealed a relaxed smile. He bowed to Ji Tianqing from afar and said with a smile, "Lord Kenshin, welcome back. We meet again." Everyone in the Xinwu continent knew that Kenshin had taught martial god Taihao in the past, and the two of them had some friendship. At this moment, it was natural for martial god Taihao to say such words. However, only the two of them knew that martial god Taihao was not talking about this matter. Instead, 8 years ago, when Ji Tianqing had left the Taihao kingdom, he had met martial god Taihao once. At that time, the two of them had met secretly and talked about many things with hidden meanings. Chapter 2447. In just 8 short years, Ji Tianqing had gone from a primordial spirit realm cultivator to an unparalleled martial god. Such a drastic change could be said to be earth-shattering. Even though Martial God Taihao had a premonition, he was still shocked and felt like he was in a dream. His thoughts returned to more than 1,000 years ago, when he had been taught by Kenshin. At that time, the sword god could be said to be in high spirit. He was the best in the world and no one could compare to him. Looking at the current Ji Tianxing, he was even better than the sword god back then. Martial God Taihao found it hard to imagine what kind of brilliance Ji Tianxing would blossom in the future. What kind of changes would he bring to Shenwu continent? Just as Martial God Taihao was filled with emotions and was in a daze, a sudden change occurred in the field. Behind him, a blinding light suddenly lit up in the night sky thousands of meters away. Whoosh! The dazzling golden light tore through the night sky, creating a gap. A tall and sturdy figure wearing golden robes and a crown rushed out of the gap. This person held a 1-meter-long sword with both hands, and a dazzling golden and silver sword ray shot out from it, aiming straight for Martial God Taihao's back. The sword ray was dazzling and contained a peerless sharpness that could destroy anything. Martial God Taihao immediately reacted and realized that he was in mortal danger. However, the two were too close, and his opponent did not give him a chance to teleport away. At this critical moment, he could only instinctively release his divine power and condense a divine shield around his body. Boom! A deafening explosion resounded through the sky. The golden and silver sword ray pierced through Martial God Taihao's divine shield and his silver armor, piercing through his back and protruding from his chest. The divine shield collapsed, and golden fragments of light burst out and scattered in the night sky. Faint golden divine blood spurted out from Martial God Taihao's chest, a ghastly sight under the golden light. Keek. In the night sky 50 kilometers away, the ancestral demon god was circulating his energy to heal himself as he sneered, his expression sinister and gloomy. He. The golden-robed man who suddenly appeared also sneered proudly. Holding the hilt with both hands, he suddenly pulled out the divine sword and sneered in a mocking tone, "Taihao, long time no see. This is my greeting gift to you. Do you like it?" The sharp sword intent left Martial God Taihao's body and messed up his organs. Pfff. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. His face turned as pale as a sheet of paper, and his aura fluctuated violently. However, he ignored his injuries and turned around to glare at the golden-robed man. Seeing the golden-robed man's face, he was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He roared in a hoarse voice, "Tianju! You despicable person!" Martial God Taihao pointed a trembling finger at Tianju as he cursed. His face was filled with disbelief. You actually colluded with the ancestral devil god? Colluding with the devil race? Martial God Taihao clearly didn't expect Martial God Tianju, one of the leaders of the human race, to be so shameless as to collude with the devil race. Since ancient times, the devil race had always been the mortal enemy of the human race. In the past 3,000 years, Martial God Taihao thought he understood Martial God Tianju. In his opinion, Tianju was just ambitious and unwilling to accept the current situation. He would never abandon his conscience and betray the human race. However, it seemed like he didn't understand Tianju at all. That was why Martial God Taihao was so angry. Ji Tianxing didn't have much of a reaction. He wasn't surprised at all. After all, he already knew about Tianju colluding with the ancestral devil god. He only thought that Martial God Tianju had appeared at such a crucial moment and severely injured Taihao with one blow. This was probably not a coincidence. It was premeditated. As expected, the ancestral devil god gave Martial God Tianju a look of approval and said with a smile, "Well done. Although you didn't act according to the original plan and attacked earlier, our goal has been achieved by severely injuring Martial God Taihao." Martial God Tianju cupped his fists and said with a smile, "The plan is dead, but the person is alive. In our original plan, we didn't expect Ji Tianxing to appear. Unfortunately, we only severely injured Taihao. If we could kill him with one blow or destroy his divine body, that would be perfect." As he spoke, Martial God Tianju showed a regretful expression. Martial God Taihao covered his bleeding chest with his hand. He was so angry that he trembled and his eyes were covered with a layer of red. "Tianju, you bastard, you betrayed the human race and colluded with the great demon lord. You will die a horrible death." Martial God Tianju held the golden sword and looked at him with a smile. He said coldly, "Ha ha, Taihao, you're still as pedantic and stupid as before. Can't you see the reality now? Tonight, you're the one who will die without a burial ground. As for me, I will follow in the footsteps of the great demon lord and obtain the method to ascend to the upper realm. I will leave this rotten and sealed world." Then, Martial God Tianju looked up to the sky and laughed proudly. Ji Tianxing frowned and looked at Tianju coldly. He said coldly, "Compared to the evil ancestor demon god, you, the scum who betrayed the human race, deserve to die even more. Tianju, I'm here tonight to bury the demon race. Since you're here, it saves me the trouble of looking for you. I'll send you on your way." Martial God Tianju laughed again and sneered mockingly, "Ha ha ha ha! Kenshin, I didn't expect you to be so arrogant after reincarnating. You and Taihao, that trash, want to kill us? Keep on dreaming. Don't forget, other than me and the great demon lord, you still have a strong enemy, the dragon-subduing general of the Heaven Punisher tribe. I advise you to think about it carefully. Do you want to die by our sword or by the dragon-subduing general's saber?" Ji Tianxing's brows relaxed, and the corners of his mouth curled up into a cold sneer. "You scum, demons and beasts will all be killed by me one by one. None of you will be spared. Your last words end here. You can die in peace." As soon as he finished speaking, Ji Tianxing's figure disappeared into thin air without a trace. He used the Absolute Shadow's divine ability to merge with the sky, earth, night, and space. His whereabouts and aura turned into nothingness and no one could guard against him. The ancestor demon god and martial god Tianju lost track of Ji Tianxing's aura and traces. They immediately became alert. Especially the ancestor demon god. His huge body shrunk and his nerves were tense as he defended with all his might. Martial god Tianju was also alert. He released his divine consciousness to search the surroundings and held the golden divine sword tightly, ready to counterattack. However, 10 breaths of time passed. The night was empty and nothing happened. Ji Tianxing did not appear. Chapter 2448. Although martial god Tianju knew that Ji Tianxing would not be scared away, he was comforting himself. He also wanted to attack martial god Taihao's morale and provoke Ji Tianxing to show himself. As expected, just as he finished speaking, a dazzling golden light suddenly lit up in the night sky behind him. Whoosh! A golden spear that was more than 10 feet long pierced out of the darkness and aimed at martial god Tianju's back. Martial god Tianju was prepared. The moment the golden spear appeared, he relaxed his brows and let out a sigh of relief. He turned around without hesitation and slashed down with the divine sword with both hands. Kaboom! Amidst an earth-shattering boom, the dazzling golden sword struck the golden divine spear. Both of them collapsed at the same time, exploding into pieces that covered the sky and covered the earth, shooting out in all directions. The violent impact caused martial god Tianju to fly backwards. He let out a painful groan as blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. The peerlessly terrifying power still injured his internal organs. However, it was only a minor injury, nothing serious. Martial god Tianju sneered and said disdainfully, "Humph, Kenshin? That's all you've got." However, martial god Tianju did not expect that once Ji Tianxing attacked, he would succeed. The god-killing spear was only the beginning of the assassination. Whoosh! Just as martial god Tianju let down his guard, another 3-inch-long golden light appeared in the night sky in front of him out of nowhere. Amidst the dazzling golden light was a 3-inch long flying dagger. When the flying knife appeared, it was less than 100 feet away from martial god Tianju. Even though martial god Tianju sensed that something was wrong and his pupils contracted and his nerves tensed, he could not dodge it in time. Bang! There was a muffled explosion. The god-slaying flying dagger pierced through martial god Tianju's divine power shield and the armor he wore under his golden robe. It pierced his chest and flew out of his back, bringing with it a large amount of flesh and organs. The terrifying impact caused martial god Tianju's body to tremble. The heart-wrenching pain caused his face to twist, and he couldn't help but let out a miserable howl. Swish! The flying dagger turned into an arc in the night sky and disappeared into the darkness, hiding again. On martial god Tianju's chest, there was a bloody hole the size of a bowl. He had mocked martial god Taihao for being a piece of trash. He was severely injured too. His condition was the same as martial god Taihao's. The heart-wrenching pain and intense humiliation made martial god Tianju furious. He was about to go crazy. Ah, Ji Tianxing, this god will tear you apart alive. Seeing this, martial god Taihao, who was in the night sky not far away, forgot about his pain and burst out laughing. Ha 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 ha! Tianju, you didn't expect retribution to come so quickly, did you? This god already said earlier, you're destined to die a horrible death. With Lord Kenshin here, you will be crushed to pieces and reduced to ashes. Martial god Tianju was infuriated by his mockery. Bloody flames surged out of his body, and his murderous aura almost materialized. Only the ancestor fiend god was not angry. He remained calm and rational. While Tianju and Taihao were talking, he silently released his ultimate killer move and attacked Taihao. Whoosh! A pitch-black 9-distress demonic blade that was 1,000 feet long quietly cut through the night sky and slashed at Taihao. The mysterious and cold demonic blade contained terrifying calamity power, and it was about to kill Taihao instantly. At the critical moment, Taihao sensed death approaching. He immediately calmed his mind and focused on dealing with the attack. Black Tortoise Big Dipper Shield. Taihao waved his palms with a solemn expression, releasing divine power without regard for anything. He activated the Big Dipper godly fire in the sky and the Black Tortoise black water in the endless sky sea. Whoosh! Endless white divine fire descended from the sky, and icy black water surged out from the ground, forming a black and white shield around Taihao like a huge ball of light. Fire and water were originally incompatible, but under Taihao's guidance, they naturally merged together and cycled back and forth. This Black Tortoise Big Dipper shield was Taihao's ultimate divine power, and it had unparalleled defensive power. Kaboom! The next moment, the 9-distress demonic blade fell from the sky and slashed at the black and white shield. There was a deafening explosion that shook the sky. The 9-distress demonic blade collapsed, shattering into black light shards that blotted out the sky, and a vast amount of black energy burst out. The mysterious black energy filled the area within a few hundred miles. A huge crack appeared on Taihao's Black Tortoise Big Dipper shield, and dense cracks appeared. Taihao's body trembled from the impact, and his face was as pale as paper. Faint golden divine blood spurted out of his nose and mouth, and his body bent over. However, he forced himself to endure the injury and used his divine power to quickly repair the shield. Seeing that the black and white shield had recovered, he finally let out a sigh of relief and wanted to circulate his energy to suppress the injury. However, he suddenly felt a burning pain on his back and legs, and the meridians all over his body started to twitch. He looked down and found that there were thousands of wisps of black energy wrapped around his legs and body. The silver divine armor he wore couldn't resist the corrosion of the black energy. His flesh and skin were rotting at a speed visible to the naked eye, turning into puffs of rotten black ash. The mysterious and cold black energy was the calamity power contained in the 9-distress demonic blade. What was even more frightening was that Taihao's eyes were gradually blurring, and his mind was becoming muddled. Thousands of images of disasters, demons, and ghosts appeared in his mind, eroding his sea of consciousness and divine soul. This was the true power of the calamity power. Taihao's expression changed, and it became extremely ugly. He couldn't care less about maintaining the black and white shield, and he didn't have time to attack. He could only retreat in a panic and flee thousands of miles away. After he was far away from the battlefield, he hurriedly took out 12 golden divine needles and pierced them into his 12 main meridians. The divine needles emitted a bright golden light, sealing his flesh and meridians to resist the corrosion of the calamity power. At the same time, Taihao circulated his divine art to keep his divine soul clear, and tried his best to dissolve the calamity power. In this way, he could only focus on protecting himself, and couldn't help Ji Tianxing at all. Ji Tianxing's situation also became dangerous, as he was besieged by Tianju and the ancestor fiend god. Sun and moon shine together. Martial god Tianju saw the hope of killing Ji Tianxing. He ignored his injuries and waved his divine sword with all his strength, slashing out a bright and dazzling divine light. Gold and silver intertwined brilliance poured down on Ji Tianxing like a flood that could overturn the heavens. The ancestor fiend god also waved his 4 giant palms, sending out balls of black calamity demonic power, and bombarding Ji Tianxing. Ji Tianxing was beaten back, and his figure flickered in the night sky, constantly changing his position to avoid the two's attacks. Chapter 2449. A Sword of Life. Ji Tianxing suddenly appeared above martial god Tianju's head. He swung the burial of heaven with his right hand and slashed down. The pitch-black and cold burial of heaven gave off a dazzling golden light. 1,000-foot-long blurry sword light with a mysterious and extraordinary power descended on martial god Tianju's head. This sword art wasn't the sword Tao divine power created by Kenshin 1,000 years ago. It was the first sword Tao divine power that Ji Tianxing created after reaching the immortal state. That's right, it was a secret art that he created based on his own experience and comprehension. This sword art wasn't an ordinary sword art. There was no terrifying light or sound, nor was there a huge and shocking appearance. Even the sword light itself was blurry and hard to determine. At first glance, it looked like he didn't have enough divine power and had slashed out when he was on the verge of death. But in reality, this sword art contained the domineering and unparalleled power of a sword that reaches heaven and the ethereal and simple feeling of a floating life like a dream. Think about it, Ji Tianxing was the unparalleled Kenshin in his last life and had reached the peak of the world. But at the peak, at the most glorious moment, he fell from the altar and was reborn as a young man. And now, this young man had returned to the immortal state after going through all kinds of hardship. The ups and downs of his past life and present life, and the journey of his heart, how complicated were the feelings and understandings he had gained from it. It was precisely because of this that the single sword of life was so mysterious, possessing both powerful and complex might. Only Ji Tianxing could create such a miraculous sword art. Even Kenshin couldn't do it back then. Whoosh! The blurry sword light arrived in front of him. Martial god Tianju was filled with fear and despair, but his mind was eroded by the illusions, and he became a little dazed. That was an invisible sword intent. It didn't have any killing power, but it silently invaded his divine soul, and he couldn't block it. His mind was naturally affected and became confused. He seemed to be smiling but not smiling, in pain but not pain, sad and confused. Bam! With a muffled sound, the blurry sword light hit martial god Tianju and woke him up instantly. But it was too late. The golden robe and soft armor he wore were cut into pieces. Even his divine body was split in half from head to toe. Blood splattered everywhere. The 2 bloody halves of the body flew to the left and right and fell from the night sky. It was still clearly visible that the eyes on his face, which had been split into 2 halves, were wide open in terror, and there was still a trace of terror on his face. This sudden turn of events stunned the ancestral fiend celestial. His 6 eyes widened in shock. It could not believe that Tianju, a LV6 martial god, had been killed by Ji Tianqing with a single slash. This was too terrifying. Whoosh! At this moment, a gold and silver divine soul divine Ju's half Tianju. That was martial god Tianju's god. His Ju half was Ju Tianju's god Ju Tianju's god Tianju's use Tianju. It could be said that he was lucky enough to keep his life. Tianju's god body was destroyed and his god soul was severely injured. He was scared out of his wits. He even forgot to curse Ji Tianqing and turned to flee to the north in a panic. Lord Demon God, please stop Ji Tianqing. I need time to heal. As he fled, Tianju didn't forget to call for help, asking the ancestor demon god to stop Ji Tianqing. Seeing that he was still alive, the ancestor demon god Tianju heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing Ji Tianqing chasing after Tianju with a sword, he quickly teleported over to stop him. Ji Tianqing, don't be so arrogant. The ancestor demon god Tianju shouted coldly. He flapped the 12 black wings on his back and released the Shura demon blades to kill Ji Tianqing. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Thousands of Shura demon blades streaked across the night sky, forming a blade net that covered a radius of 10 miles, enveloping Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing relied on his powerful god body and didn't use any defensive techniques to defend himself. Instead, he attacked fiercely with his sword. Swish, swish, swish. He swung his sword and slashed out hundreds of dazzling golden sword lights at the Shura demon blades. Purring, purring, purring. Hundreds of Azura demonic blades and dazzling golden sword lights shattered into pieces. Even though dozens of Shura demon blades stabbed Ji Tianqing, they couldn't hurt him. They only left some scratches on his skin. Furthermore, after the Shura demon blades shattered, they exploded with surging black gas. The mysterious and powerful calamity energy immediately enveloped Ji Tianqing, corroding his god body and corroding his god soul. When the ancestor demon god Tianju saw Ji Tianqing wrapped in black gas, he instantly sneered. Now you know how powerful this god is. Have you tasted the 3 calamities and 9 disasters? The ancestor demon god Tianju was very pleased. He thought that he would be able to see Ji Tianqing suffer under the calamities and calamities. However, the next scene left him dumbfounded. Boom! Ji Tianqing actually blasted the black gas away with a punch and rushed out unscathed. He held his sword and charged at the escaping martial god Tianju. The calamity energy surrounding him was actually unable to enter his body. The moment it touched his god body, it was dispersed. No. This is impossible. The ancestor demon god Tianju was stunned and exclaimed in disbelief. He hurriedly used the demon god eye. His 6 eyes emitted a dazzling purple light as he carefully observed Ji Tianqing, trying to figure out what was going on. The next moment, the scene in his eyes changed. Ji Tianqing's figure became blurry, leaving only a white outline. It was that holy white energy that blocked the corrosion of the calamity energy. Especially, in Ji Tianqing's head, there was a blazing white gem that was shining with holy light. It was as bright as the stars. Seeing this scene, the ancestor demon god Tianju finally understood the reason. It's light. It's actually the light divine power. Damn Ji Tianqing, how could he have obtained the light divine power? That is a power that only god kings can control. How could he? No, he seemed to be a god king in his previous life? Thinking of this, the ancestor demon god Tianju's expression became extremely ugly. His eyes also became extremely solemn. As an ancient great demon god, he naturally knew that the light divine power was the demon race's greatest nemesis. He had never forgotten how he was killed and dismembered in the ancient god war and fell in the starry sky. Just as the ancestor demon god Tianju was feeling complicated and hesitant, the situation changed again. Ji Tianxing teleported 3,000 miles away and caught up with the escaping martial god Tianju. Tianju was only left with an injured divine soul. He was extremely weak and could not use his teleportation ability. Seeing that Ji Tianxing had caught up, he used his divine power at all costs and tore open the dark sky, wanting to escape into an alternate space. However, just as he tore open a gap in the night sky, he was pierced by a 3-inch golden light. Bam! Within the golden light was the 3-inch-long god-slaying flying dagger. Following a dull explosion, the god-slaying flying dagger pierced into the divine soul and burst out with a destructive divine power. After suffering such a destructive blow, Tianju's divine soul collapsed on the spot, exploding into dozens of gold and silver fragments that scattered into the night sky. Chapter 2450. Martial God Tianju was dead. One of the leaders of the human race had fallen in Dark North Mountain just like that. However, Ji Tianxing did not feel regretful. He only felt happy and relieved. After all, martial god Tianju deserved to be executed. If not for his scheme and help, the ancestral fiend god would not have been revived. The Tianxian continent and Shenwu continent would not have suffered a destructive attack and plunged their lives into misery and suffering. To be fair, martial god Tianju was an accomplice of the demons and one of the main culprits. Whoosh! Whoosh! More than 30 gold and silver spirit fragments scattered in the night sky like butterflies. With a wave of his hand, Ji Tianxing collected the divine soul fragments. He had never forgotten that there was still a young man riding a koan in the divine tower. He was still a remnant soul and urgently needed to recover his strength. At the same time, the ancestral fiend god turned into a blood-colored stream of light and flew over from afar. He had just arrived at the scene when he saw Ji Tianxing killing martial god Tianju. Witnessing this scene with its own eyes, its entire body shook, and its 6 eyes widened in shock. Deep fear flashed across its eyes. No matter what, he had not expected the outcome to be like this. He had been confident that with martial god Tianju's help, he would definitely be able to kill Taihao and Ji Tianxing. However, he had not expected that martial god Tianju would die before Taihao. Ji Tianxing's strength had reached such a terrifying level. Now that it was left to fight alone, how could it resist Ji Tianxing's peerless might? With this thought, the ancestral fiend god retreated without hesitation and fled toward Dark North Palace. Whoosh! He cut through the night sky like lightning and disappeared into the horizon in the blink of an eye. He wanted to escape back to the Blood Sea Abyss as soon as possible and borrow its power to resist Ji Tianxing. Not far away, Ji Tianxing had just collected martial god Tianju's spirit fragments when he saw the ancestral fiend god turn around and flee. He raised his eyebrows and sneered. He muttered. He charged over so aggressively, but he turned around and fled in fear? The dignified ancestral demon god has actually been reduced to such a state. Looks like he's at the end of the road and will definitely die. As he spoke, Ji Tianxing took the sword of burial of heaven and flew towards Baiming Palace. After a short 10 breaths, he returned to the sky above Baiming Palace. Baiming Palace was brightly lit, and there were hundreds of blood-red demonic lights flashing. Hundreds of demon race guards and experts were standing guard outside the palace with swords in their hands, looking murderous and ready to fight. Inside the palace, many demons were running around in a panic, running away in a panic. Under the curtain of night, there were shadows everywhere, and there were constant cries of surprise, curses, and roars. Ji Tianxing scanned Baiming Palace with his consciousness and immediately confirmed that the ancestral fiend celestial was not inside. His consciousness went past Baiming Palace and probed behind the mountain peak. He found a huge, pitch-black abyss. The blood energy in the abyss overflowed into the heavens, surging with dark red blood light, rising into the sky with demonic mist and black energy. The ancestral fiend celestial had already dived into the abyss and was stirring up the boundless sea of blood, crazily devouring the power of the sea of blood. The sea of blood was formed by the blood energy and souls of billions of living beings. It released countless red threads that entered the ancestral fiend celestial's body. As a result, the injuries on its body healed rapidly, and its strength was also recovering. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing frowned, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. The ancestral fiend celestial is an ancient fiend celestial, and it has the great abilities of the blood demon path and the Azura demon path. It also has the power of the 3 calamities and 9 tribulations. If it escapes tonight, it only needs to slaughter the common people to absorb the blood and souls of billions of living beings, returning to its peak state. Even if the demon race is exterminated, as long as it is alive, it will be an endless disaster. Ji Tianqing made up his mind and slowly raised his left hand, crazily accumulating divine power. In the blink of an eye, he clenched his left hand into a fist, and with boundless power, he punched the abyss of the sea of blood. Dragon Elephant Divine Fist. His left fist emitted boundless golden light, condensing into the phantom of a dragon elephant, and hit the abyss of the sea of blood, exploding with destructive power. Boom! Following a deafening explosion, the abyss of the sea of blood splashed into the sky, spewing out bloody light and demon chi that blotted out the sky. The cliffs around the abyss all crumbled, collapsing into countless fragments of earth and stone that fell into the abyss. The violent and shocking impact shook the land thousands of miles around. The mountain peak where Beiming Palace was located shook violently, and more than 10 wide cracks appeared. The majestic and dignified Beiming Palace was also shaken to the point that more than half of it collapsed. Earth and stone flew everywhere, leaving behind a pile of ruins and dilapidated walls. Many of the weaker demons were killed on the spot, and their bodies were reduced to dust. The desolate land thousands of miles in front of the mountain peak also cracked, and dust flew into the air. The power of Ji Tianqing's punch was truly terrifying. However, the sea of blood in the abyss surged for a long time, and gradually dissolved the power of the divine fist. The ancestral fiend celestial hid at the bottom of the abyss, still recovering from its injuries and recovering its strength. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing's expression became more serious. I underestimated the power of the abyss of the sea of blood. The ancestral fiend celestial used it as his lair, so he must have set up a defensive divine formation. It seems that only by using the power of the heaven-mending orb can I destroy the sea of blood. Thus, Ji Tianqing activated the divine power of the heaven-mending orb, held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands, and stabbed at the abyss of the sea of blood with all his strength. Burial of heaven. Following his angry roar, endless blazing white divine light gushed out from the sword of burial of heaven. A huge divine sword that was tens of thousands of feet long descended from the sky and stabbed into the abyss. In that instant, the blazing white light illuminated the world, illuminating the surrounding thousands of miles as if it was daytime. The unparalleled divine power dispersed the bloody light and demon chi in the world, causing the surrounding thousands of miles to become clear. Boom! Another earth-shaking explosion erupted, resounding through the universe. Torrential waves of blood gushed out from the abyss, forming a huge barrier to protect the abyss. However, the huge divine sword instantly pierced through the dark red waves of blood, stabbing into the bottom of the abyss. A divine power that could destroy everything exploded in the abyss, immediately destroying the entire abyss. The ground within a radius of 5,000 miles cracked open, collapsing and collapsing. The huge abyss also became a huge pit, with endless bloody water gushing out and sprinkling on the ground. However, even more of the bloody water was purified and evaporated when it came into contact with the divine white light. In just a short moment, the abyss of the sea of blood was completely destroyed. The abyss was originally hundreds of miles deep, filled with dark red blood water. Now the abyss had collapsed, filled with endless dust and shattered rocks, turning into a huge pit that was dozens of miles deep. 80% of the bloody water had been dispersed, turning into a dried-up mud pit. Furthermore, the ancestral fiend celestial was also injured by the divine sword light, letting out a shrill cry. Roar! It roared furiously, flying out from the abyss of the sea of blood, rushing high into the sky. In the next instant, it waved its 4 huge palms, wanting to tear open the sky and escape by teleporting. Chapter 24:51. From beginning to end, the ancestral fiend celestial did not care about the survival of the demon race. He only wanted to use the billions of demon race to start a war to replenish his strength and quickly return to his peak. In his opinion, as long as he could return to his peak, even if he had to sacrifice the entire demon race, it would be worth it. After all, he was an ancient great demon god who had once slaughtered hundreds of races. He had the right to rule the world. Therefore, in such a dangerous situation, he did not hesitate to abandon the demon race and only hoped that he could escape safely. Swoosh! A huge gap was torn open in the pitch-black night sky. The ancestral fiend celestial was anxious and immediately wanted to enter the gap and escape into the alternate space. However, right at this moment, Ji Tianqing once again charged over valiantly. Heaven-piercing sword! He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and frantically activated the power of the heaven-mending pearl, ruthlessly thrusting out a blazing white sword that was 3,000 feet long. The dazzling sword light carried with it an unparalleled divine power that could purify all demons. This sword was about to completely kill the ancestral fiend celestial. At this critical moment, the ancestral fiend celestial was filled with shock as he violently shrunk his body. He opened the 12 black wings on his back and formed a pitch-black cold shield wall to protect his vitals. Bam! With a loud sound that shook the heavens, the huge divine sword pierced through the black shield wall and into the ancestral fiend celestial's body. The black shield wall collapsed and exploded, filling the sky with black fragments. These were the ancestral fiend celestial's wings and bones. The demon chi within had been dispersed and turned into black ashes after falling to the ground. The huge divine sword pierced right into the ancestral fiend celestial's chest, piercing through his heart. His internal organs were shattered by the sword light on the spot. The divine power turned into a blazing white light and crazily surged into his body, spreading to his 4 limbs and 3 heads. Immediately, the demon chi in the ancestral fiend celestial's body was purified by the divine white light. Its pitch-black body, which was as large as a mountain, was immediately riddled with cracks and hundreds of holes appeared on its body. From the cracks and holes, black fog and demon chi surged out and dissipated into the night sky. Even the ancestral fiend celestial's bloody mouth and eyes turned into empty holes, burning with a blazing white divine fire. Ah! It was enduring unparalleled pain, and it let out a heart-wrenching howl. It twisted its body crazily, as if it could collapse and explode at any moment. When he saw this scene, Ji Tianqing slowly put away the burial of heaven, while a wisp of an icy cold light flashed in his eyes. After being struck by this sword, his internal organs will be destroyed, and his demonic body will be purified by the divine power. A generation of great ancient demon gods will also be reduced to ashes, reduced to nothingness. He was completely confident that the ancestor fiend god would not be able to survive. After all, the ancestor demon god was only at LV3 martial god realm. How could he resist the divine power of the heaven-mending pearl? Unless the ancestral fiend god could recover to the celestial deity realm or the divine lord realm. Ji Tianqing stood in the night sky, quietly looking at the ancestral demon god, waiting for it to collapse and completely disappear. But at this moment, an unexpected scene occurred. A black figure suddenly appeared from the spatial crack behind the ancestor fiend celestial. This figure was covered in a black robe, and the hands that were exposed from the sleeves were a pair of claws covered in dragon scales. The black-robed man stretched out his hands without hesitation, transforming them into a pair of giant black palms, and grabbed the ancestor fiend celestial, who was on the verge of collapse. Before the ancestor fiend celestial could react, the giant black palms brought it into the spatial crack, and it disappeared with a swoosh. In the next moment, Ji Tianqing reacted and wanted to chase after it with his sword. However, the spatial crack had already closed, and the black-robed man and the ancestor fiend celestial had disappeared. Ji Tianqing chased after it, releasing his divine sense to cover a radius of 2,000 miles, but he could not detect their auras. Even when he used a secret technique to check a few layers of alternate spaces, he could not find any trace of the black-robed man and the ancestor fiend celestial. Without a doubt, the black-robed man had already escaped with the ancestor fiend celestial. Ji Tianqing was filled with resentment. He gritted his teeth and clenched his fists so tightly that creaking sounds could be heard. Damn it! I was too careless. Indeed, when he stabbed the ancestor fiend celestial with the giant divine sword, he was certain that the ancestor fiend celestial would die. After he let down his guard, he neglected the fact that the spatial crack opened by the ancestor fiend celestial had not closed. Who would have thought that the ancestor fiend celestial would be rescued by the mysterious black-robed man just as it was about to be destroyed? Now Ji Tianqing was filled with regret, but it was useless. After a while, he calmed down and suppressed his anger, recalling the scene from before. He clearly remembered the black-robed man's silhouette and the pair of black claws that were exposed from his sleeves, which were covered with ice-cold black dragon scales. Who exactly is that black-robed man? Martial god Tianju is already dead. Who else would come forward to save the ancestor fiend celestial? Ji Tianqing frowned and pondered for a while, gradually coming up with an answer. Could it be the great demon Saint Ling Xian? That's right, it could be him. I have not seen him since I came to North Underworld Mountain. Of course, this was only his speculation, and he needed to verify it to be sure. If it was really saved by the great demon saint, it would not be a big deal. At most, it would just live a little longer and change its burial place. Its body has already been destroyed by the light divine power, and its strength is extremely weak, on the verge of collapse. With its current strength, it is impossible to eliminate the light divine power. Sooner or later, it will be completely purified and disappear completely. With the great demon saint's strength, even if he sacrificed his life, it would be useless, and he would not be able to save the ancestor fiend celestial. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing heaved a sigh of relief, and his anger dissipated. At this moment, a golden light flew over from afar and landed beside him. It was martial god Taihao. His face was still as pale as paper, and his breathing was chaotic and weak. He cupped his fists and bowed to Ji Tianqing, saying, "Lord Kenshin." Ji Tianqing turned his head to look at him, sizing him up, and asked, "Taihao, how are your injuries?" Martial god Taihao smiled bitterly and shook his head, saying, "Sorry to disappoint Lord Kenshin. I thought that after cultivating a divine technique, I would be able to eliminate evil. Who would have thought that I could not even block one of the ancestor fiend celestial's attacks, and my body would be corroded by the mysterious demonic power. Now my divine foundation has been damaged, and my vitality has been greatly damaged. I am afraid that it will be difficult to get rid of that mysterious demonic energy in a short period of time." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and comforted him. "You don't have to blame yourself. The ancestor fiend celestial is an ancient great demon god, who had reached the peak of the divine path and slaughtered hundreds of races. The divine ability that hit you was its ultimate technique, the power of 3 calamities and 9 disasters. Not to mention you, any other martial god would not be able to block or resolve it." Martial god Taihao finally understood, and nodded with a serious expression, saying, "I see. Then, wouldn't I?" Chapter 2452. At first, martial god Taihao was in despair, his eyes dim. But when he heard Ji Tianqing's words, his spirits were lifted, and his eyes brightened. The fire of hope reignited in his heart. He hurriedly bowed to Ji Tianqing and thanked him sincerely. Lord Kenshin, you are indeed the nemesis of the demon race. You have mastered the legendary divine power of light. Taihao is extremely grateful that you are willing to save me. Taihao will never forget your kindness. Ji Tianqing nodded and ordered, although the ancestor fiend god has been rescued by a mysterious person, he has been severely injured by me and will not live for long. Now that the demon race is in a state of disunity, it is the best time to annihilate them. Go back to the vast divine kingdom and command the soldiers to launch a counterattack. I also need to destroy the demon race in North Underworld Mountain. After this is over, I will return to the vast divine kingdom to find you and help you get rid of the power of calamity. Martial god Taihao's expression became even more agitated. He was both excited and in disbelief. Even his lips were trembling. He took a deep breath and suppressed his emotions. He cupped his hands to Ji Tianqing and said, "As Lord Kenshin has instructed, Taihao will return to the vast divine kingdom to take charge of the situation." Then, he bid farewell to Ji Tianqing and turned to fly through the night sky, rushing back to the vast divine kingdom. Ji Tianqing looked at the half-collapsed and ruined North Underworld Palace. Cold, killing intent flashed in his eyes as he once again drew the sword of burial of heaven. Inside and outside North Underworld Palace, thousands of demon race guards and elite experts were fleeing in panic. The news of the ancestor fiend god's death was spreading at an extremely fast speed. Transmission jade slips rose into the air near North Underworld Palace. This news was being passed on to the various demon race tribes. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Ji Tianqing swung his divine sword, sending out dazzling golden sword lights that covered the sky and scattered around North Underworld Palace. With a loud rumbling sound, the 2,000-meter tall mountain peak was razed to the ground on the spot, turning into endless dust. The thousands of guards and elites of the demon race were also smashed to pieces by the sword light. Ji Tianqing turned around and left. Wielding his sword, he charged towards the demon race's holy city 1,000 miles away. In the newly built holy city, there were still over 1 million demons living there. Meanwhile, in the depths of Dark North Mountain, in the Ghost Desert, the vast and gloomy Ghost Desert was one of the forbidden areas of the demon race, and there were no signs of human habitation for many years. Even the experts of the Devil Clan and the Tribulation passing stage rarely entered this place. Shwa! Suddenly, a crack appeared in the dark sky. A black-robed figure with a height of more than 10 feet appeared. He looked around in the sky for a while. Seeing that the surroundings were quiet and there was nothing out of the ordinary, he let out a sigh of relief. Then, he waved his hands and grabbed at the crack in the void, pulling out a pitch-black beast the size of a mountain. This pitch-black beast was 3,000 feet tall and had a ferocious and terrifying appearance. It had 3 huge heads. However, the pitch-black giant beast's entire body was covered in cracks. Its mouth, nose, and 6 eyes had all become hollow, and they were currently releasing blazing white divine flames. Without a doubt, this was the ancestor fiend god. It was still suffering from the corrosion of the divine light power. The demonic energy that it had cultivated all its life had been purified and dispersed, and its heavenly demon body was also on the verge of collapse. The black-robed man carried it and descended from the sky into the desert. When they landed, there was a loud bang, and the ground within 100 miles shook. When the ancestor fiend god landed, its body bent over and it knelt on the ground. It rolled around in incomparable pain and let out a muffled howl. More and more cracks and holes appeared on its body, and intense white light rose up. It was getting closer and closer to death. Seeing this, the black-robed man waved his claw and tore off his large cloak. He urged anxiously, "Ancestor, calm down. You must hold on." This subordinate has already brought you out of Dark North Palace and escaped to the Ghost Desert. Don't worry, Ji Tianxing will definitely not catch up to us in the short term. The ancestor fiend god was still in extreme pain, and its entire body was trembling and twitching. However, it no longer rolled around. It lay weakly in the desert and said in a muffled and hoarse voice, "Ling Xian, this god did not misjudge you. Although you are not a pure-blooded demon and are not considered a descendant of this god, you have always been loyal and loyal. But you've always been loyal, even more so than the other descendants. You've done well." Without a doubt, the black-robed man was the great fiend god Saint Ling Xian. Receiving the ancestor fiend god's praise, he revealed a proud expression. He hurriedly bowed and said in a sincere tone, "To receive the ancestor's praise is Ling Xian's greatest honor. Don't worry, ancestor, Ling Xian will definitely heal your injuries and return to your peak. Although we have been defeated for now, as long as we lay low and slowly scheme, we will be able to take revenge sooner or later." Although this was what he said, a cold light was hidden in the depths of Ling Xian's eyes. The ancestor fiend god lay in the desert and twitched a few times before saying in a low voice, "Very good. Ling Xian, this god will always remember your loyalty. If there is a chance in the future, this god will definitely set up a monument for you and let the demons worship you forever." As it said that, the ancestor fiend god quietly extended its huge claw that was full of cracks and held Ling Xian in its palm. Ling Xian heard its strange tone and saw its strange actions, and immediately realized that something was wrong. "Ancestor, what are you? What are you doing?" He. The ancestor fiend god laughed weakly and said in a low voice, "Ling Xian, aren't you absolutely loyal to this god? To help this god heal my injuries and return to my peak, aren't you willing to give up everything? Now, it is time for you to fulfill your promise and contribute to this god." The ancestor fiend god's voice was very strange and contained a strong bewitching power that could suppress Ling Xian's soul and will. As it said that, it grabbed Ling Xian tightly with its two huge claws, causing him to be unable to move. At the same time, it released a strong demonic power to steal Ling Xian's magic power and blood energy to replenish its own body and resist the corrosion of the light divine power. Although the light divine power was very strong and could not be dissolved by its own strength, but it could stall for time and linger on for a while. And it knew that the light divine power in its body was limited and not endless, and could not be regenerated. If he had enough magic power, blood energy, and soul essence, he would be able to completely exhaust his light divine energy. At that time, he would be able to recover from his injuries. Ling Xian's expression changed and revealed a look of disbelief. He exclaimed, "Ancestor, you want to sacrifice Ling Xian to dissolve the light divine power? No. You can't do this. Ling Xian is so loyal to you and is your most trusted subordinate. How can you do this to me?" As he spoke, Ling Xian's expression was one of fear and shock, as if he could not believe it. But his eyes were cold and there was even a sneer in his eyes. The ancestor fiend god was only focused on absorbing his energy and did not realize that something was wrong. "Ling Xian, this god is giving you the chance to fulfill your promise and sacrifice yourself." Chapter 24:53. The ancestral fiend god no longer concealed his intentions. After absorbing great fiend god Saint Ling Xian's blood and energy, his pain was greatly reduced. This allowed him to see the hope of clearing the light divine power and recovering from his injuries. He was like a drowning person who had grabbed onto a life-saving straw and was unwilling to give up. Ling Xian's expression and reaction also changed. He was no longer as fearful and panicked as before. His eyes were still calm and his lips curled into a cold smile. He silently activated a divine weapon hidden in his body to resist the ancestral fiend god's devouring. At the same time, he looked coldly at the ancestral fiend god and asked coldly, "Ancestor, you are indeed an ancient fiend god. You are heartless and cruel to the extreme. I am your most loyal right-hand man. For the promise you made back then, I worked hard for you without complaint, and worked my heart out for you. And the result? Not only did you not fulfill your promise to help me break through to the deity realm, you even wanted to sacrifice my life to help you recover from your injuries. Is this how you treat your subordinates and your people? Then it is no wonder that in ancient times, you were betrayed by everyone and turned into ashes. Hearing this, the ancestral fiend god's body shook. He glared at Ling Xian, his 6 eyes spewing white divine flames. He shouted, Ling Xian, you treacherous beast, how dare you speak to me like this? Treacherous? Ling Xian's lips curled into a self-mocking sneer. He suddenly raised his head and laughed. Ha 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 ha. I treated you wholeheartedly and used the power of North Underworld Mountain to help you recover to the deity realm. But in the end, I became a treacherous person. Do you know what I regret the most now? The ancestral fiend god urged his divine power and desperately absorbed his blood and energy. He shouted, What? Ling Xian's eyes were filled with hatred. He said in a vicious and gloomy tone, What I regret the most is accepting you into North Underworld Mountain and serving you like an ancestor. I have thought countless times that when you were in such a sorry state and weak state, I should have gathered my courage and hardened my heart to refine you. If I had refined your divine soul and obtained your memories, I would be the one who has become a god. I will definitely not be as selfish as you. I will definitely lead Dark North Mountain to develop and eventually conquer the entire world. At first, Ling Xian's voice was very low, but towards the end, his emotions became more and more agitated, even becoming impassioned. The ancestral devil god was silent for a moment before he gradually stopped absorbing Ling Xian's blood energy. He laughed coldly with a hoarse voice, Ling Xian, these thoughts have been hidden in your heart for a long time, haven't they? That's right. Ling Xian admitted without hesitation. Since they had already shed all pretenses of cordiality, there was no need to hide anything. He looked at the ancestor demonic god coldly and bellowed with disdain and disdain. I once thought that the great demonic god who had slaughtered hundreds of races and almost destroyed the entire world was an insufferably arrogant giant demon, an invincible peerless expert, with a domineering aura and wisdom that looked down upon the world. Therefore, I chose to recognize you as my master, welcomed you into the North Underworld Mountain, and made you the progenitor of my race. But I never expected that you would actually be so short-sighted, selfish, and cold-blooded and merciless to the extreme. In order to quickly recover your strength, you hurriedly launched a war and sent millions of warriors to attack the Luo River God Nation. Even when my race was defeated and millions of warriors died on the battlefield, you remained indifferent, because you obtained the blood energy and souls of millions of living beings. From then on, I harbored resentment and disappointment towards you. Ling Xian's tone was filled with grief and indignation. There was no hysteria in his expression, but his eyes were filled with contempt and hatred. The ancestor demonic god did not bother to refute. He listened silently and quietly resisted the erosion of the light divine fire. Ling Xian laughed self-mockingly and continued, Finally, when you broke through to the god realm and reappeared the prowess of a demonic god, we had reached the end of the line. Finally, we could stand up straight and raise our heads to regain our prestige. But from the start you were just an armchair strategist, arrogant and conceited, and did not place the experts in the world in your eyes. When General Dragon's subduing demon came, you negotiated with him twice, but both times ended in failure. Even when General Dragon's subduing demon humiliated you, you could only endure it and did not even have the courage to fight him. What right does such a useless and cowardly trash have to boast about yourself? What right do you have to lead the demonic race and call yourself our ancestor? Ling Xian questioned sternly. His words were very intense, and he completely humiliated the ancestor demonic god. The ancestor demonic god was naturally furious, but he did not lose control of his emotions. He stared at Ling Xian, and his aura was extremely cold. He asked in a low voice, "So, from then on, you decided to betray me and rely on General Dragon's subduing demon? You escorted me here today, was it also premeditated? Even the divine weapon in your body was given to you by General Dragon's subduing demon, right?" Ling Xian was stunned for a moment before he took out a pitch-black, palm-sized metal awl from his body. At first glance, this bare and ordinary divine artifact looked like a black spinning top. Ling Xian held the black spinning top in his left hand and nodded. "That's right. This is the boundless divine stone that General Dragon's subduing demon gave me as one of the bargaining chips for our cooperation. Other than that, General Dragon's subduing demon has already promised me that he will give all the continents other than Shenwu continent to my race. Together with General Dragon's subduing demon, I will divide this 5 elements world. In the distant future, General Dragon's subduing demon will even help me leave this world and conquer the vast universe." As Ling Xian spoke, his tone was confident, and his face was full of smiles. His eyes were filled with anticipation and longing. The ancestor demonic god sneered in disdain. His voice became louder and louder, and his laughter became more and more contemptuous. "Hee. Ha 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 ha." Ling Xian frowned and glared at him. He shouted, "What are you laughing at?" The ancestor demonic god's laughter gradually stopped, and he said in a contemptuous tone, "Of course, I'm laughing at the two of you. 2 fools colluding with each other. A weak and inexperienced void god who has never even come into contact with the higher realms dares to talk about conquering the universe? Yet, there's also a despicable ant who betrays his master and believes in that fool's words. He's still dreaming." Ling Xian was a little angry from the humiliation, and he shouted, "So what? At least he's 10 times better than you, a failed and selfish demon." "Hee." The ancestor demonic god's voice was weak, and he sneered weakly. "Ling Xian, you're the short-sighted ant. This god's time is too short. In just a short 8 years, I've recovered to the deity realm, which is already shocking. If you give me another 8 years, I can even give you this world. Not to mention breaking through to the deity realm, even helping you become a godlord wouldn't be difficult for me." Without waiting for the ancestor demonic god to finish speaking, Ling Xian sneered. "Hee. It's a pity that you're unlucky to have met Ji Tianxing, who has also reincarnated. You're restricted by him in every aspect, and you're inferior to him in every aspect. That's why you're in such a situation. The heavens want you dead." Chapter 2454. Ling Xian's words struck the ancestor Fiend Celestial's heart. The ancestor Fiend Celestial, who was originally calm, was so angry that he almost went berserk. "Bastard! Ling Xian, you evil creature! You and Ji Tianxing are the same, evil creatures that deserve to be punished. Death is not enough." Seeing him so angry, Ling Xian laughed proudly. "Ha ha ha ha! Did I poke your sore spot? This is the greatest sorrow of your life." A dignified ancient great fiend celestial, a peerless death god that ruled the world, was actually suppressed by a junior. This is a great humiliation. But don't worry, after I absorb your power and refine your soul, I will kill Ji Tianxing for you. Furthermore, I will lead the Fiend Celestial to prosperity, rule the world, and make the Fiend Celestial worship me as their ancestor. I will create the glory that you have not created. I will fulfill your unfulfilled wish for you." As he spoke, Ling Xian released a vast amount of magic power and injected it into the boundless divine stone in his left hand. Swoosh! The boundless divine stone released a layer of black light, protecting his entire body. Furthermore, the boundless divine stone turned into a black whirlpool and started to devour the ancestor Fiend Celestial's divine power. The ancestor Fiend Celestial was immediately on guard, and cursed angrily and angrily. "Ling Xian! You despicable and shameless bastard! You have wasted this god's nurturing and high regard for you. Ha ha ha, nurturing and high regard? Ling Xian activated the boundless divine stone's power as he sneered. You wanted to kill me just now, what right do you have to call me despicable now? I have only learned your ruthlessness, and am wiser than you. I am the winner who has the last laugh. As the ancestor Fian Celestial's divine power was extracted by the boundless divine stone, it was transferred into Ling Xian's body. Ling Xian became more energetic, and his entire body emitted a bloody light. And the ancestor Fian Celestial's power was rapidly weakening, and could no longer resist the corrosion of the light divine power. Its fiend celestial body was collapsing at an accelerated rate, turning into a large pile of black ash. The surging light divine fire spewed out from the holes and cracks all over its body, illuminating half the sky. The ancestor fiend god struggled with all his might as he roared furiously, desperately trying to break free from the suppression and devouring of the realmless divine stone. However, it had long been weakened to the extreme and was unable to break free from the power of the realmless divine stone at all. In its grief, indignation, and despair, it laughed sinisterly with a heart full of resentment. He he he. Ling Xian, you truly are the most sinister and despicable devil under this god. I never thought that I would die in your hands in the end. But don't be too smug. This god will never lose. Even if I turn into ashes, I will never let you have your way. You are so short-sighted, despicable, and stupid. You will soon go to the Yellow Springs and continue to be my slave. After saying that, the ancestor fiend celestial completely gave up resisting. It desperately resisted the devouring power of the unbounded divine stone, but allowed the light divine fire to burn its divine power and devil body, drowning its divine soul. Shwa! Blazing white divine flames of light gushed out of its body, rising fiercely and drowning Ling Xian like a sea of fire. Its body quickly crumbled and turned into black ash, and its soul gradually shattered as well. Ling Xian was instantly shocked and revealed an extremely anxious expression. He hysterically cursed, "Bastard! You idiot, you would rather die than let me take advantage of you." The black light released by the realmless divine stone firmly protected him, resisting the corrosion of the light divine fire. In the short term, his safety was not a concern. However, seeing the ancestor Fian Celestial's divine power and divine soul quickly dissipating in the light divine fire, his heart ached to the extreme. Originally, those things belonged to him. But now that things had come to this, all he could do was try his best to snatch the divine power and divine soul from the light divine fire. Hiss hiss hiss. Wisps of black and red divine power, mixed with the fragments of the divine soul, separated from the ancestor Fian Celestial's body and were devoured by the realmless divine stone. The ancestor Fian Celestial's 30,000-foot-long body also crackled and burned, and soon fell apart. In just a short time, the light divine fire gradually extinguished. The ancestor Fian Celestial's body also completely dissipated. It turned into black ash and merged into the pitch-black sand, and was carried away by the cold wind. More than half of its divine soul fragments had been purified by the light divine fire, and the other half had been devoured by Ling Xian. The original spot was empty, and apart from the traces of black ash on the ground, nothing was left. The whistling cold wind swept over, causing Ling Xian's long hair and black robe to flutter. He slowly kept the realmless divine stone and stared at the ground expressionlessly. He muttered with some regret, "It's a pity that the originally perfect plan has turned out like this. I wonder if just 30% of the divine soul's memories and 20% of the divine power can help me break through to the godly state?" After standing in a daze for a long time, he then put away his disappointment and regained his spirit. He took out a communication blood jade and sent a message to General Dragon Subduing. "General, the plan has been successfully completed. I will immediately enter seclusion to break through to the godly state. Soon, I will be able to fight side by side with you and divide the world." After sending the message, Ling Xian turned and flew into the sky, disappearing into the horizon. In just a short 2 hours, Ji Tianxing destroyed the holy city of the demon race. The majestic city with a radius of more than 200 miles turned into ruins filled with ravines and deep pits. In the messy ruins, broken walls, corpses, armor, and weapon fragments of the demon race could be seen everywhere. The black soil was also stained with a layer of purple by the endless demon race's blood. Without a doubt, he had killed all the demons in the holy city. His hatred for the demon race could not be washed away by all the water in the East Sea. Even if he slaughtered 10 more cities, it would not be too much. Above the ruins, Ji Tianxing stood in the sky with a cold expression. Looking down at the ground below, he muttered to himself, "There is no trace of Ling Xian in Baiming Palace and the holy city of the demon race. It seems that the black-robed man who saved the ancestor fiend god is him." The black-robed man's body shape was very similar to Ling Xian's. In addition, Ling Xian had not appeared, so Ji Tianxing was basically sure that it was him. As for General Dragon's subduing, it was not that he had not thought of him. But General Dragon's subduing's body shape was special. 2 ferocious black dragons extended from his shoulders. It was really too easy to recognize him. After a moment, Ji Tianxing collected his thoughts and thought to himself, "Forget it, I will kill my way back first. Even if Ling Xian saved the ancestor fiend god and let it survive by chance, I can find another chance to completely eliminate it. Since I can kill it once, I can kill it 10 times. Therefore, Ji Tianxing flew south. Wherever they passed, as long as they encountered demon race tribes and cities, they would destroy them without exception. Killing as he traveled, he only returned to the vast divine kingdom half a month later. Martial God Taihao had already made arrangements and ordered his soldiers to counterattack with all their might, killing the demon race armies and reclaiming their lost territory.